Good.
Just wanted you both to know that this class is being recorded.
Hello and good morning.
Hello and good morning.
Good morning.
How do you pronounce your name?
Gorakh. Gorakh.
Say it one more time.
Gorakh. It's like Laura, or well, if you go to Whole Foods, there's a brand called Gorakh. That's Gorakh.
Gorakh.
Yes, that's exactly right. Yeah,
Great. Gorakh, I just wanted to ask, what's the program you're using that's allowing you to do the picture-in-picture and kind of shift in and out with the presentation? It's super cool.
Magic, right?
Magic.
I'm using OBS on top of, well, I'm using NDI with OBS with Zoom. So NDI allows you to stream from, here, watch, let me show you this before other people join. So NDI allows you to do this, which is, let me see, actually, no, I can even show you this. No, it doesn't do that. Okay. All right. So here's what NDI is doing. NDI actually allows me to do this, allows me to change angles because I'm using my phones as cameras. So this is camera 1, camera 2, and then you're back to the main camera, which I'm going to switch back to FaceTime, and boom, we're here directly.
Oh, cool.
So,
So camera 2 is sort of, camera 2 is the monitor, is like your presentation essentially.
Yes. And I didn't want to, this is what the problem with the presentation is, if you present on Zoom, and what it does is it makes your face real tiny, and it's hard to see who's speaking and what. So this allows me to control my screen size, my own image size. And that way it's easier, when I'm not really saying something that needs to be read on the screen, I can switch back to something more reliable.
And I see NDI here. It's like NDI.TV. And what was the other one you said? OB?
NDI, and then the other is OBS. OBS is a open broadcasting software. It's a software people use to switch cameras when they're streaming.
Okay, cool. We're already learning stuff. Content Dharma is so rich.
Well played, sir. Well played.
Rob, did you want to be spotlighted during the class, or do you want to just leave it in regular gallery mode and let people choose what they'd like to do?
Yeah, I'm all right with both. If you spotlight me and other people are saying something, then they may not be visible. But usually it plays the main speaker. So I think it should be all right if we just leave it as is. But it's your call.
Okay.
Yeah. And we got a few minutes to go. So we'll begin when we do. And I'll take cues from you, Sisha.
Oh, what kind of cues can I do?
You let me know it's 9 o'clock when we start.
Okay. Morning, everybody. It's 9 o'clock. It's like just about everyone's here. I think we might be missing one or two people.
We're missing Celeste and Jackie.
And are they coming this morning? Do you know, Jessica?
As far as I know, I've had no indication that they're not.
Okay.
Michelle, should we begin? All right. Namaskar and good morning. My name is Gorakh, and I'll be your instructor today for the Introduction to Hinduism or Sanatana Dharma course. This is a 3-hour session, and I've broken it up into 3 different segments. For the first hour, we're going to talk about what Hinduism is. I'll give you an introductory, really fast flyby to the tradition. In the second part, being that you're either chaplaincy students or spiritual care, spiritual companionship students, I will talk about the idea of spiritual care in the Hindu tradition. And in the third part, I'll take you inside a temple, and we'll get to see what's happening inside the temple and what the celebrations and everything are about. I do want to make sure that we leave room for breakouts and instructions. So we'll try to have a 15-minute breakout in every hour, and hopefully that'll give you enough variety and interest. I also want to make sure I'm covering your questions. You may feel free to stop me as I'm talking, or if that's not your style, you can put something into the chat window, and Michelle or I will pick it up as we get to it. Or alternately, you can raise your hand when I ask and speak up. This is an interactive session, and I have taught this course for several years. There is no question or comment that is unwelcome. Everything is welcome. This is a safe space. And I do understand that Hindu tradition is going to be extremely new to some of you. And so it is okay to ask the questions, including the questions that you think I might be offended with. Completely feel free to ask questions. This is the job that I am being asked to do here. So I'm happy to answer questions, whether in the flow of things or later, it's all right. Now, before I begin, is there any question or comment? And I just want to understand you a little bit more, who's here, and if you want to tell me what questions you have, are there pressing questions, anything's all right. For the next couple of minutes, I just want to hear from you.
Gaurav, I just wanted to point out the recording and see if there was anybody who had an issue with the class being recorded.
Wonderful, appreciate it. Okay, any comments on anyone has had a brief run-in with Hinduism or Hindus or people in Anya? Yes.
I had the opportunity many years ago to study in India based out of Bangalore for 3 months. And then last semester, I did a paper for spiritual care on Hinduism.
Oh, and I love it. Yes.
Yeah, because there are so many Hindus in the Bay Area that as a chaplain, I felt that I should be aware of the tradition and how to communicate with Hindus who are sick in the hospital. And so I have a little bit of a background. I'm really excited to learn more today.
Fantastic. Justin, sir, you raised your hand.
Yeah, I lived in India for 6 months in around 2005. Bangalore also, but mainly Tamil Nadu. Did do some trips up to the north in Darjeeling, and but really immersed myself and wore traditional clothes and visited temples, studied a lot, connected a lot with Ramana Maharshi's teachings and his ashram and Aurobindo. I was at in Oroville, so Sri Aurobindo also, And yeah, I've just had a rich practice for maybe like 15 years of different yogas and studying Bhagavad Gita and that sort of thing. But a lot of love for India in my heart.
Fantastic. Anybody else want to, Jody?
So I've been a yoga teacher for about 23 years and also follow Gangaji, who's in the Ramana Maharshi lineage through Papaji, and study the Patanjali's Yoga Sutras and the Bhagavad Gita and some other Hindu texts, and really have a deep love for Hinduism, a lot of the practices.
Fantastic. One more comment and then we'll switch over and I'll begin. Any pressing questions or comments or questions that you might have, feel free to put them into the chat and I promise to pick them up at the right time. All right, I'm going to begin with a conventional opening prayer. All the yogis here will instantly recognize what that is. That's after I'll tell you about myself after. How's that? So let's get the prayer up. This is the opening prayer for, this is from the Upanishads, which are sacred texts. And it's used in exactly the sort of setting that we're involved in here, which is a conversation between someone who's instructing and someone who's receiving those instructions. And in many ways, it's a sort of a legal disclaimer type thing. I can describe more in detail, but let's first get in. So I'd like you to join me. Please sit comfortably. Sit in any comfortable posture. If you're sitting on a chair or a bed or you're standing, everything is all right. As long as you're comfortable and sitting with your back straight. The back is straight but not stiff. Relax your shoulders. Keep your head, neck, and back in a straight line. Close your eyes gently and relax the expression on the face. Bring your attention to your breath. As you breathe into the belly and let the belly expand. Breathing into the belly, let the belly expand. Breathing out from the belly, let everything go. As you exhale, let go of all your thoughts. Breathing into the belly, let the belly expand. As you exhale, let go of all your preoccupations. Just be here in this moment. Back, neck, and head are in a straight line. The back is upright, but not too tight. The face is relaxed, the shoulders are relaxed, and the belly is free to move with the breath. We're going to chant Om 3 times, and then I'll chant the opening prayer in Sanskrit. I will also describe its meaning. If you like, you can join me by bringing your palms together in Namaskar Mudra like this, with the palms together at the center of the chest. Press your palms together gently. Touch your fingers together gently. Gently touch the back of the thumbs into the chest and stay right here. Bring your attention to the hollow space between the palms. Pay attention to the vibrations. Pay attention to the sensations between your palms, a transfer of energy, a feeling of resonance. We're going to chant Om now. Exhale completely, take a deep breath. Inhale. 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 Saviryam Karavavahai Tejasvinavadhitamastu ma vidvishavahai. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Bend forward gently with a sense of surrender. Come back up, breathing in, release your palms, rub your palms together to generate some heat, and then gently cup your eyeballs with the hollow of your palms to transfer that heat. And then blinking, open your eyes and pull your palms back like an open book. Still blinking into your palms. Namaskar. Good morning and welcome. Now, I'm going to, no, I'm not going to scare you with that first. Let me tell you a little bit about myself. My name is Gorakh. My spiritual name is Ekras Gorakh. I am by day an executive. I have, I've run and sold a startup. It's what you do in Silicon Valley, which is where I live. So it's the trade. If I were in LA, I'd probably be an actor. There's probably room for bald people there. But here I am. I live in Silicon Valley. So I've had a startup. I'm involved in sales. I am from India. The people who come here tend to be engineer MBA types. I am guilty as charged as well. That's my professional side. And this is the side on the left that you see on the slide. On the right is my spiritual side. I am, like many of you here, a yogi. I've been teaching yoga here for about over a decade. I have also been teaching meditation of various types for a good part of that decade as well. I run two institutes. One is the Living Deeply Foundation, where my objective is to take traditional learning from the Hindu tradition and make it accessible and available to people in modern lives. The second part, which is even more relevant to our conversation today, is I am a board member and dean at the Hindu Community Institute, which we have created a pre-chaplaincy program. It's called Counselor of Hindu Tradition. And essentially for Hindus to become chaplains, we did not have a choice of learning in a Hindu framework. And so that's the course we've created. It teaches spiritual care and chaplaincy from a Hindu perspective. And our students then go to GTU for their interreligious chaplaincy and can then go on to become chaplains. Our objective with the Hindu Community Institute is to put the Hindu tradition to work. And we're doing a lot of work on that front. So that's the context. This is a class on Hinduism that I have taught previously. And so I have some experience with some of the questions you might have. So feel free to please ask questions. All right. Now, Hinduism is a strange and wonderful religion for those who haven't been exposed to it. And I want to talk to you a little bit about that, because it turns out the Hollywood obviously has deep insight into all traditions, except into, I guess, traditions that are outside of Hollywood. So the images of Hindus that you might have, I have grown up with looking at people in Hollywood, looking at this fine gentleman. This is actually a very famous actor. It's a sequence from Indiana Jones and the Temple of Doom, of course. And the image of Hindus, of course, is strange with multi-gods and a very strange religion in many senses. And coming from a Western perspective in a very stylized and iconified way, you may be right? Mileage may vary, but the truth is that while the tradition is different from the Abrahamic tradition followed in the West, it is altogether very familiar to you. It turns out that the Hindu tradition is even more familiar to you than you might know. Why? Because a lot of the parts of Hinduism are already known to you. Think of it as piecemeal dharma. Dharma, of course, is, there are many definitions for dharma, I'll come to it. But essentially, this tradition has been understood and digested into a lot of Western constructs that you're familiar with. If you've heard of Om chanting or you've been to a single yoga class, you already know a lot about Hinduism. If you practice vegetarianism, as I'm vegetarian, then you know that the leading followers of vegetarianism in the world are Hindus. If you've practiced Ayurveda, you've been to a doctor that practices Ayurveda, that's something that is also familiar to you. And that comes from Hinduism. If I say namaste, you probably have heard it before. It's in a yoga class. If you believe in karma, not being a female dog, but karma as a system which keeps the world intact, where you do something and it comes back and impacts you. Or if you believe in reincarnation, or if you've seen the Matrix movies and are waiting for the fourth one, you already know a lot of ideas from Hinduism. Over half the people that die in this country are now cremated. Cremation is a deeply Hindu practice, and for reasons I'm happy to explain why we cremate our dead and not bury them, and so on. And so many parts of piecemeal Hinduism. In fact, let me give you another word. If you see someone like me with a talking head on a TV, those are called pundits, right? The word pundit comes from Sanskrit. If you know, people in Boston were previously called Boston Brahmins. That word Brahmin comes from Hinduism. If you've, of course, seen the famous Robert Oppenheimer quote of I am become death, the destroyer of worlds. Robert Oppenheimer, of course, he was quoting the Gita. So a lot of Hinduism has seeped into our culture. And because Hinduism is an open tradition, people can come in on their own and go on their own. We don't have gates to bring people in or out. It turns out you may already be a Hindu. What do you know? It's one of those things. So in that sense, I'm happy to tell you about something you're already very familiar with, even though you may think otherwise. I do want to begin with something more fun than me talking into a camera. And that more fun is also me talking into a camera, but hopefully better. All right. Niels Bohr, a famous scientist, said, this, by the way, slide was made last year after. It was terrible. After the elections, it was a bad time for the country. But anyway, there are some things so serious that you have to laugh at them. So here's a set of jokes I wrote about you might be a Hindu. So with your permission, I'm going to play those jokes and let's see if you like. Now, Hindu ideas are all around, and without knowing it, you might already be a Hindu. Here's how to find out. You might be a Hindu if you've used this pickup line. Yeah, no, it didn't work out in that life either. You might be a Hindu if back in high school you had a dream. In that dream, your priest said, you're not going straight to hell for not believing in God. You never told anyone about that dream. You might be a Hindu if back in high school you told your mom, I only believe in science. She wasn't having any of it, right? Show me your AP Science grades. You might be a Hindu if your yoga teacher welcomes you with a Namaste and you hang back after class to correct their pronunciation. Hi, excuse me, it's Namaste. Thank you. You might be a Hindu if Wes Anderson announces his next movie and you're like, I would like my ashes to be sprinkled in the Pacific Ocean. You might be a Hindu if you voted yes on are we living in a simulation? The Matrix certainly does not have you enlightened Buddhas. You might be a Hindu if after yesterday's elections you thought, oh my God, does not adequately cover all the gods that should be asked to set things right. You might be a Hindu if you hear Apu from Simpsons say, thank you, come again, and wondered if he was talking about reincarnation. And that is how you know if you might be a Hindu. All right, bunch of jokes. Hopefully those were fun. Some of these were dad jokes. Some of my kids do not understand them. All right, so Hinduism is all too familiar, and I'm going to tell you a little bit about it. Any comments on the jokes? I apologize if they were not funny. All right, here's me in fourth grade. I grew up in going to a Christian school, and this I remember vividly. This is fourth grade. and find Canaan next to the Sea of Galilee, Mr. Dorsey's class. And I actually could find Canaan next to the Sea of Galilee. I ended up studying the Hebrew Bible and the New Testament at length through my moral science classes all this while. And so I have some familiarity with the Abrahamic construct. And of course, now I've been living in the West for 21 years, so that's that. There's a story that I'd like to tell you about me relearning my own tradition and finding out what it is by direct experience and not by hearing other people. The story is from, it's a fable like Aesop's fables, but this is Panchatantra. And the story is about a Brahmin. A Brahmin is a priest. He goes to another village and to do some priest work. And as a return gift, they give him a goat. And he slings the goat on his back, and he's walking out back to his village. It's getting dark, and he is walking on. And as he's going through the village, there are people that are somewhat hungry and greedy, and they start to scheme to get the goat from him. So one guy walks up to him and says, "Hey, Brahmin, why are you carrying a dog on your shoulders? Dogs are unclean." And so the Brahmin says, "What are you talking about? What foolishness is this? Can't you see this is a goat?" And so he moves on. This second person walks up. "Hey, Brahmin, why do you have a cow on your shoulders?" Brahmin says, "This is ridiculous. You guys are probably crazy. This is a goat, not a little cow." He keeps moving. He's at the edge of the village, at the edge of the forest, and the third guy walks up. And the third guy says, "Hey, Brahmin, why do you have a monster on your shoulders?" At this point, the Brahmin is really convinced that this is a shape-shifting monster. And obviously, he's been duped by the villagers that gifted him this monster. So he throws the monster away, runs into the forest and back to the safety of his home. And the moral of this story is to not let the crooks tell you what's what. You have to look back at your own, what you're carrying yourself, and learn for yourself what you have. And that's been my experience and the experience of many Hindus who, all of us were educated in a Western framework when we've had to relearn our tradition. Hinduism is an interesting and very deep and varied tradition. And it's very hard for even practitioners like myself to get a full grasp of what the tradition is. And I'll try to give you a sort of well-rounded perspective on that. All right, Hinduism is a living and breathing system. It is not, we are not people of the book in that sense. We're very different framework-wise from the Abrahamic tradition. We don't have a book, we have thousands or millions of books. And those books are all books that were previously carried in memory, and then eventually when writing came along were written down, but still carried in memory. Right behind you, what you're seeing is a printed out version of the Bhagavad Gita. And this is, again, chanted first. It's in Sanskrit, it's in verse, so you can actually sing it. And then over the generations, it's still remembered in the head and the heart, but also now written down as you're seeing behind me. So it is a living and breathing tradition. There is a lot of nuance and texture to the tradition, which is hard for outsiders to understand. I should say that European reductionism is absurd. And a lot of European commentators that you see on Hinduism were doing that because it was part of the vibe in the 19th century to go from Europe to other countries and gift them the gift of altogether new histories. This has been done all over Africa, all over the South and North America, and of course in the East as well, in India and China. Entirely new histories were created and given, and the same genius civilization that came to America and called them Indians also went to India and gave us a whole different kind of history. But it's European reductionism. It is absurd, conflating culture, history, precedents, and prejudices, and making them into a whole mixed bag of things they call religion. So as you look at Hinduism, it's better to talk to someone who's practicing it and has had the ability to sort of reflect on it. And a lot of books just don't do justice to it. All right. So what does Hinduism actually believe? I'm going to pause here. Any questions or comments? Justin, you did raise a hand, and sorry, I did not pay attention to the raised hand.
No, that's okay. As do you feel that because of the British occupation and everything that's happened in India, that as you try to, you and many Indians try to reconstruct or what this is, what it was, maybe pre-occupation, pre-colonization, do you feel like that's even possible?
Yeah, that is a great question. And I see, Rose, you have a question as well. So is it possible? It is possible, but I can tell you the sense of loss is very palpable. We read our texts, and a good chunk of the texts are impenetrable. They're hard to comprehend because the practices described there are not contiguous. A lot of practices are, but a lot of the text has been lost to time. But not only that, a lot of the fluency that we had with the Sanskrit, which is the technical language of the scripture, is lost, and a reductionism of sort, where your words have two meanings or more meaning. For example, the English word set has 160 odd meanings. If you reduce it down to one version of that meaning, then all nuance, all poetry is lost, because the whole point of innuendo is to say something and mean something else. That's deeply embedded into scripture, because that's how you write. You add more volume to your text, but all that is lost when you translate it. And a lot of Hindu instructors that came to the West, in fact, look at Mahatma Gandhi. He never read the Sanskrit himself. He read it by way of an English translation, which means that he's already receiving a reduced version. So there is a very, very clear loss. And it's not just British occupation. We were occupied by, sort of Islamic invaders for a longer time than that. So there is a contiguous tradition, but there's a lot of loss of information as well.
Thank you.
Rose, I will answer your question. In fact, I have an answer to your question, so I will come to it at the right slide. All right. What are core Hindu tenets? Let's just talk through that. There's a few things that I will tell you, and this is not the system of do's or don'ts. In fact, the first Hindu tenet is that there is no permanent set of do's or don'ts or can do or do not do. There are recommendations, but there are no commandments in the sense that thou shalt not drive on the right side of the road. Because of course, thou shalt not drive on the right side of the road in UK, but thou shalt very much drive on the left side of the road, right side of the road in the US. And so it's called Deshkal and Patra. So space, time, and context dictate the right behavior. And a good part of the Hindu text, especially the large epics, the mega epics, are entirely scriptures that are describing the right thing to do by laying out hundreds of thousands of contexts before you in story format. And so that tends to be a very complex religion to understand. All right, here's the Hindu idea of time. Hindu idea of time is not a single unidirectional time that the arrow of time starts and ends. There's an end of time, there's judgment, and then again, there's infinite heaven or hell. None of that business. Hindu tradition is very cyclical. Time is cyclical. We see the coming and going of seasons, and we understand that there is cyclicity in all creation, which means that we believe that everything is recycled. Nothing disappears forever. And so in that sense, when you're looking at a Hindu practitioner that has understood this, their understanding is that nothing is permanent. Impermanence is built into everything. And so there is a sense of letting go. And one of the early Upanishads, actually the first line of that Upanishad is simply renounce and enjoy. Let go of your craving for permanence and enjoy. And that becomes a core part of the Hindu tradition, very sophisticated understanding of time. Then we'll talk about zero. If you've been to Buddhist education, or if you follow Buddhist speakers, you already know this from Buddha's version of this, which is shunyata, nothingness. And the idea of zero, in fact, the mathematical zero, was invented in the lands and the philosophies of the culture of India, because the European philosophers didn't really care for that. It turns out zero is useless. You will just use V and I and X and L and you can kind of do enough math, but not too much, because it turns out no one goes out to buy zero fish, right? And because no one goes out to buy zero fish, it's not something that you consider valuable. But also zero is extremely dangerous as an idea, because zero is also infinity. And the absence of the void is something to be avoided in much of Western philosophy and therefore religion. And so zero has not been seen kindly until after zero was imported from India, but that does come from the Indian tradition. The idea of infinity is deeply embedded into the Hindu tradition. And what I'll do is I'll play you another video. And this is actually a Nobel Prize winning video, so I'm happy to have an assistance. But the interesting thing is, one of our earliest scripture, I'm going to change cameras now, just switch over, you can see me. All right. One of our earlier scripture or verses we remember is the Isha Upanishad, Isha Upanishad. So that's one of the, it's an 18 verse, very short text. But the opening lines, I already talked about renounce and enjoy. The framing line is an exploration of infinity. Because you see, the earlier Hindu sages were not concerned about the nature of God, and I will talk about that in a second, but about the nature of the world as it is. How does the world work? And they arrived at their formulation for infinity, which is, the verse is, Om Purnamada Purnamidam Purnat Purnamadachyate Purnasya Purnamadaya Purnameva Vashishyate. You heard the word Purna so many times. What they're saying is, from infinity comes infinity. If you take infinity out of infinity, infinity still remains. Now, why are they discussing math in what's obviously a sacred scripture? Because math is not devoid of sacredness. And more importantly, the nature of God is being described here, that the creator created this infinite universe, and yet there has been no diminution. Nothing has come out of the creator that has reduced the creator. The creator is infinite. His or her creation is infinite. And therefore, this chain of infinity continues. And now for the Nobel Prize winning video. Let's see if I can get to it. 1 second. And I tell you this because when I describe the tradition, you'll get a sense, when I am describing the but you'll get a sense of the philosophical richness of the tradition as well. All right, we got this. Okay, right here. This is a speech about breakfast items, it turns out, which is, in this case, a bagel and a donut. So hopefully you'll enjoy this.
I will start by explaining to you a concept from the citation that might not be familiar to you, and that's the concept of topology. So I brought my lunch, and here you see, it's a cinnamon bun. Here I have another thing. I have a bagel, okay? And here I have a pretzel. It's a Swedish pretzel with 2 holes in it. Now, for us, these things are very different. This is sweet, this is perhaps salty, different shapes, etc. But if you are a topologist, it's only one thing that is really interesting with these things in which they differ. This thing has no hole. The bagel has 1 hole. The pretzel has 2 holes. The number of holes is what the topologist would call a topological invariant.
All right. Okay, so why this sense of infinity? It turns out this shapes our understanding of God and God's creation. Our God is not someone who's old, bearded, sitting 60 miles up in the sky. Our God is you and I. Our understanding of God is very different and very nuanced. Our Creator did not create us and go away and sit somewhere and grumble. Our Creator is within our hearts. Our Creator is in all of creation, and this conversation is an act of creation as well. And so when I say namaste, it is not a yoga studio cliche. I am truly bowing to the light within you, recognizing it, of course, as the light within me myself. And so that understanding of divinity and infinity plays a big role in shaping our consciousness. We are not driven by a set of rules we do not understand. We cannot try to understand for sure. All right, now I'm going to switch back to the screen. I'm sure questions are going to arise. Keep asking those questions. All right, okay, I'm going to switch this joke. All right, one of the early sensations that that my forebears had was they just sat and they weren't thinking, how do I define God or understand God? None of that. Their interest was, of course, avocados. I'm just kidding. Their interest was not avocados, but their interest was in, look, how does this whole world work? The sun rises every morning, the seasons come and go, the stars move in a somewhat predictable manner. Crops come and go in particular cycle. All of this seems to be, there's something that's going on. And so the really, really early reflections we have on our tradition are about Rita, the order in the universe. Now you know the word Rita from the word rite, rituals, and the word rite, R-I-G-H-T. All of those come back from the same Indo-European root, which is Rita, order. And so the question I have for you, being so close to breakfast, I'm in California, is who ripens the avocado? When you buy the avocado rock hard from Costco, they are rock hard. And in fact, if you take them to the airport, they will prohibit you from moving forward because it's a grenade. You can hurt someone with it. But then 2 weeks later, they're ripe. And 3 weeks later, you got to throw them because they're overripe. Question is, they're not attached to the tree. They're not attached to some sort of timing device or some internet wizardry. They just know how to ripen and when to ripen. And the question that my ancestors would have had if they were buying from Costco is who ripens the avocado? Because that must mean that there is order in the universe. And being that there is order in the universe, we can now only try to understand what that order is, how that order is maintained. Now, mind you, that it does not require a formulation for God, which I now want to come to next, which is Hindus have a very wide range of godliness in our tradition. You don't need to believe in a formal God at all. You could be a non-believer in the existence of a God, and you would be 100% within the mainstream. You could believe in one single, everything is one, which is what the majority of the tradition is. You could believe in two. So the one that's one is called Advaita. There are not two, there's just one. Everything is one. You and I are the same same substance. Then there is a two, people who believe that there is a creator and a created entity. And then there are, of course, many gods. The entire spectrum from zero to infinity is covered in the Hindu tradition, even with respect to godliness. And so if you're an atheist and you claim that as something in the Hindu tradition, you won't be excommunicated, because to us, that's like, okay, you're an atheist, no problem. We can handle that. And so that gives you a sense of the tradition. Now, the next sense of the tradition is this. Is actually, now I go back to elementary and middle school physics and biology. Let me ask you this question. If I were to rhetorically ask you the question, what makes a leaf green? If you went to the physics class, they would tell you the leaf is green because it absorbs all the other colors other than green and reflects green. And that's why you see the leaf is green. You go to a biology class, and the biology class will say, hey, the leaf is green because it has chlorophyll, and chlorophyll is green and whatnot. Now, they have different answers to essentially the same question. Mathematicians and religious zealots agree on one thing. And that agreement is that there is one right answer to every question. But as you've seen from this leaf example, that is not true. There can be many right answers to essentially the same question, depending on where you're coming from. And this is the essential difference between the sort of monotheism that is followed in the Abrahamic tradition and the sort of unity that is experienced in the Hindu tradition and Dharma in general, which is that we believe that there are many right answers. So to force my conception of God and whether my God's beard is 60% gray or 80% gray, There is not, it's not none of my business. If my God is actually young, energetic, and has 4 arms, and that's just, my conception of God. You may have a different conception of God or no conception of God. We are okay with that because we are not trying to force our opinion. We ask that you look for your sense of divinity and let that guide you. And so the Hindus truly believe that, in Niels Bohr, I'm quoting Niels Bohr again, which is there are trivial truths and there are great truths. The opposite of a trivial truth is plainly false. But the opposite of a great truth is also true. And the Hindu philosophers have always been about the looking for these great truths. And those great truths also encompass, paradoxically, their opposite. So I'll give you this example. There is this famous verse in the Rig Veda, which is one of the earliest books from the tradition. Books in quotes because it was remembered in verse, not as books. But I actually have this is my own personal copy. This is from that. I'm going to just switch, let you see the screen, but not that you can read it. But I'd like you to read the first line that simply says, reality is one, truth is one. The learned and the wise speak of it in many ways. The truth is one, the wise know it by many names. And this is one of the earliest findings of the Hindu sages. And that has guided the way the tradition works. We truly allow for this experiencing of multiple truths. One way I can show you that just in this note is that the names of divinities mentioned in this verse, Varuna, Mitra, you're seeing those names, Divya, Suparna, those are not mainstream deities anymore. We don't think of the divine with those names anymore, though, there is, we recognize that these are names of the divine. Those are not names we use currently. The reality changes. In fact, now I want to come and tell you about Sanatan Dharma. Our name for our tradition is Sanatan Dharma. Sanatan and Dharma are actually paradoxical entities. What that means is Sanatan, S-A-N-A-T-A-N-A, and Dharma, of course, D-H-A-R-M-A. Sanatan means that which is true, that which is always true. Sat is true. That which is always true is, of course, by definition, always true, which means if it was true on Monday and not true on Thursday and true again on Friday, then it's not true because it hasn't always been true. So, for example, is my existence true? The answer is this physical body, the shape and form. I was not there in this shape, this body before I was born. I'm here now, and I will not be in this body after I'm gone. So what is the truth of this body? Not so much. This is not truly Sanatan. It is not timeless, outside of time. Dharma, on the other side, is the paradoxical opposite of that. Dharma is that which is true, but is forever changing with space, time, and context. What is the right thing for me to do is always changing and evolving. And Sanatan Dharma, just those two words encompass within them the timeless and the thing that is forever in time, in the context of time. And so in that sense, the tradition is harder to understand because it is changeful and also changeless at the same time, which makes it really, really hard to comprehend as an outsider. All right. Moving along. There is a question here that I've missed, I guess. Oh, screen is too small to read. Okay, Michelle, I apologize for the small screen. I thought I'm screening. Okay, we'll see. You will try to make the screen large. Okay.
Now we can see it, but when it's tiny, when your face is big in the screen.
Okay, yeah. That was just okay, good. All right, now, Rose, I'm now answering your question. Karma. Let me ask you this question before I answer, Rose, your question. Let me ask you this question. If the conditions of birth are random and the conditions of birth dictate the key facets of my life, for example, if you see on the chart on the right, this is life expectancy at birth. And depending on the country I'm born in, my life expectancy could be high or low. And so one of the major factors of my life happens to be random, right? Because I did not pick the country I was born in. And so it's completely random. And so the question is, if the conditions of birth are random, and those are a majority of my life's sort of drivers, then is all life random? And if therefore all life is random, what is the objective of this life? Why are we trying to optimize in the very small non-random part of our life? It seems to be random everywhere. And so you have to ask, is there order not just to the ripening of the avocados, but is there order to this universe, right? And so the answer that the Hindu sages came up with is karma, the law of karma, is that nothing is random. There is a system of cause and effect that is ricocheting, percolating through this entire universe. And you too might have come to the same conclusion that the system of order is karma. You do something bad, eventually something comes back to bite you. You do something good, eventually something good happens to you. That's karma, you say. That word karma comes from the Hindu tradition. It has a very deep psychological impact. And it turns out, Rose, I'm now pointing to your question. When Pew recently surveyed people in India about their religious beliefs, a majority of people in India actually believe in karma. And karma is not a non-dharmic sort of a belief. It is not a belief that exists outside of this philosophical construct, but it is universally understood. There are other things that are here in this Pew survey, which I haven't highlighted, but you do get a sense that in general, people have adopted the same beliefs, even though they may, technically be in a different religion. Then you have to ask yourself this question: what does it mean to belong to a particular religion? Right. All right. So karma is a big part of the Hindu tradition, and this informs our behavior. And some astute observers will observe and indeed point out that there is a flaw in this argument. What about babies who face a very brief and terrible life, and then what happens to them? Or what happens to really truly evil people, and how come they end up living long lives, and what gives? And the answer to that is, well, we have a way around that logic by also our corollary belief in rebirth. We actually believe that the self in this self, this physical self, is born and grows up and dies and decays and so on. But the self inside this physical self continues from life to life. And I quote this from the Brihadaranyaka Upanishad. One second, let me move my lovely face to this side so you can actually read this. This is from the Brihadaranyaka Upanishad, which says, as a caterpillar, having come to the end of one blade of grass, draws itself together and reaches out for the next. And so the self, having come to the end of one life, and dispel all ignorance, gathers in his faculties and reaches out from the old body to the new. We believe in a continuity of life from one body to another, and this is transformative. This automatically denies the need for an infinite heaven or hell, the need for retributive justice that is essentially irreparable. We believe in justice, of course, karma, but we believe that karma will ricochet through life and through many lives. And because of that, we have a much different attitude towards death, including, I tell you, cremation. Why do we cremate our dead and not bury them or rest in peace then? Because we are not expecting our dead to rest in peace, waiting for judgment day. We are not waiting to be reunited with our physical bodies and brought back to life and subject to judgment. That isn't our system. Our system is that at the time of death, the self, Atman, separates from the body. Is now, if you go to all those near-death experiences that now have been documented copiously, that there's a separation from the body. You're hovering on top. You can see your separation from the body. And because you are not familiar with you're confused about what's going on, you may be trying to get back in and lead your normal life, but it is time to move on. How does the family signal to the self that don't rest in peace, because that's resting in confusion and resting in a clinging But bon voyage, go in peace to your next destination, because in a state of confusion, you do have to pick your next life. You're going to make poor choices because you're confused, deluded, and filled with fear and regret. Instead, if the family says, my loved one, it is time for you to move to your next life, and they signal that by cremating the dead, by actually puncturing the skull and saying, there is no recourse to this body, please move on to your next life. We bid you farewell. And doing that allows us to give them a feeling of peace, a feeling of closure. And in this peace, they can go to their next birth in a more sensible manner. And that's why rebirth and death are very different in the Hindu tradition. We don't identify with this body. And so we are not afraid of death. Because of course, Groundhog Day style, we're going to be back doing something similar in a different body until we learn. And so there's a process of evolution. And this is an important construct in the Hindu tradition. And in fact, many, if not all, dharmic traditions. All right. I want to show you this really interesting story. Any questions or comments so far? You can tell me to rush or not. Reincarnation, there's Anya, there's a question. Is it possible to be reborn in the past? In science fiction, yes, but in the Hindu tradition in general, the reading is always in forward time. I'm not aware of any instances where we're being born in the past. Cloud Atlas, on the other hand, the movie with Tom Hanks, did have reincarnation with being born in the past, but I'm not familiar in the Hindu text with that. All right. Now, why so many gods is a natural question. When I take you inside the temple, you'll come to the same question yourself. Why so many gods? And for that, I had a really interesting video about a Muslim gentleman who went to Norway from Pakistan, a Pakistani Muslim gentleman. And he I agree with Ariel, though the book was better than the movie, but okay. So this Pakistani gentleman, there was a documentary I saw. It was very touching, very moving. And I want to show you this one particular line. And I promise I am still answering your question about why so many gods. This, okay, I'm going to get rid of this. All right, you're seeing my screen. Affirmative? All right. So this gentleman, he's describing in the 70s, he goes to Norway or Sweden, and he says, for the first 6 months, I was really, really afraid. Why? Europe was a new world for us. To us, everyone in uniform looked the same, whether they were a bus driver, a traffic warden, or a hotel porter. When you're new to this idea of God, then everything is scary. Everything is you're trying to see in this monochrome. But when your eyes get accustomed to God, when you're used to seeing God, then you see God in different ways, in different forces, the forces of creation, the forces of annihilation, the forces of sustenance, the forces of light, the forces of sound. All of these are ways of knowing God. In fact, in your own body, their energies are at work. You are not digesting your food, your body is digesting the food. You're not circulating your blood, your body is circulating the blood. You're not consciously aware of these processes, and yet they run. As it is with the body, so is it with the universe. There are so many unconscious forces that are at play, making the universe work, all of which are a way to experience and understand God. When you say the government is working or not working, you may be saying that the DMV is slow. You may be saying that the cops are quick to arrive. You may be saying that the federal aid for emergencies is enough. You may be saying that the Supreme Court takes too long to decide on cases. You see, when you say the government is working, you mean a lot of different things. And when your eyes have accustomed, you get to say, all right, this is the federal government, this is the Supreme Court, this is the Congress, this is the president, this is the army, this is the armed forces. You begin to understand different ways of understanding government. And when you're in the divinity business or sacredness, your eyes, when they settle, you get to see different forms of divinity, and you start giving them name, and you start understanding them. You even start anthropomorphizing them, so you're able to understand divinity. We are able to understand divinity. I give you another example. this is almost hurricane season. It is hurricane season, and Hurricane Anya will come, Hurricane, Herschel will come, or whatever, right? Hurricanes are given names. Do the hurricanes care for being named? They don't. But we give them names so we may number and remember which one we're talking about. Rita was a bad hurricane, for example, and so on. So when we give God a name, when we know God by a particular name in the Hindu tradition, it's not that the God wants to be named as such. It is what name we remember this type of divinity by. And so there's a very nuanced understanding of divinity. And in the Hindu tradition, you saw the joke I made about 330 million gods. It's actually a typo. There are 33 categories of divinity. And the word for categories in Sanskrit is koti, category, koti. And koti also means billions or millions, tens of millions, basically. So in a typo, you're going to say, oh, there are 33 or 330 million gods in the Hindu tradition. That is not so. It is a poor mistranslation. Again, same geniuses who went to India and who went to America and called both people Indians also helped us translate our text and say there are 330 million gods in the Hindu tradition. That is not so. Even though you see the myriad gods and goddesses in the Hindu temple, I will show you those myself. The understanding is very clear. Everyone understands that there is only one creation, one God, one everything is one. But yet we see the many. And that's the play that we're trying to understand philosophically and in life, practically. So the Hindu understanding of divinity is very different. And we are not, in that sense, God-fearing people, even though Indians use that language. We are not afraid of God. Our word for divinity is Isha, love. We love our relationship with God. We are not fearful because we are also made of God. What is there to be afraid of? Right? In the cave inside the heart, in the Upanishad class that I take, I talk about this. This here, this physical heart, this here, not the physicle heart, the cycle, the chakra over here. Inside the cave of the heart is our connection to the divine. And what we're doing through our various practices is really center ourselves here, feel that connection to the divine. And that connection is, like every connection from the heart, one of love, one of warmth, one of deep interconnection. And that connection is our connection with God and the divine. We are therefore, Hindus in general are not afraid of God because we have gone above or beyond some rules or whatever. We are essentially connected with God and divinity. All right, moving right along. And so the objective in the Hindu tradition is to know the true essence of everything. And so the famous verse in the Chandogya Upanishad is, if you know gold, you know also that which is made of gold. The truth of everything, the truth of everything can be known by knowing the truth of one thing, which is the self. And this knowledge of the self it requires meditative practices. This knowledge of the self requires devotional practices. This knowledge of the self requires an attitude to work and action itself. All of those inform us about our own subjective innermost self. And we recognize then at that point that everything is a projection from the self. You and I are essentially the same. And the analogy I will use for you is that of a dream and the dreamer. In your dreams, certainly you all dream, and in your dreams you see other people. When those dreams expire, sorry, I'm just switching cameras. When those dreams finish and you wake up, where are those other people? Have they been killed? Have they been destroyed? Or they were just you pretending to be not you? In your dream, you have a subjective individual self and other people that you see in the dream. But outside the dream, when you are awoken from the dream, right, as we speak, you recognize that other people were also you, pretending to not be you. They were also made of you. From this dream, when we wake up, like the Buddha is the woken one, right? When you wake up out of this dream, you too recognize the essential sameness of all of us. You and I are the same person. You're just pretending to be not me. You're just me pretending to be not me. That's the understanding that we have, which changes our attitude towards each other. that also changes, and I'm going to come to the breakout, I think soon. Yeah, okay, we are here. This changes in many ways how we approach justice, how we approach rules of behavior, and how we approach social constructs as well. All right, okay, so now let me ask you this question and then we can go into the breakout. Let's talk about karma and rebirth. The question I have for you in breakout, and Michelle, would you please help me by dividing everyone into maybe, let's see, there's about 20 of us, maybe into 5 breakout groups, and just think about this question for the next 10 minutes. If I buy into the idea of karma, which is that there is justice in the universe, it is a just and ordered universe, and the possibility of rebirth, of continuous lives, does that change how I approach my understanding of life and the rules I live my life by? Is that a question that's understood well? All right, Michelle, would you mind putting us all into breakouts? And then it is, let's see, what is the time right now? It's 10 o'clock Pacific. We will be back in about, well, we'll try to do this for 10 minutes and then debrief for 5. Is that good? Wonderful.
Okay.
All right. Thank you, Michelle, for splitting us into groups.
Yep. All right. Let me put, let's see. Okay. Now it wants to close it in 30 seconds. Let me see why. Why? I don't seem to have the power to stop it from closing rooms.
Can you make your host? Will that help? You should be able to.
I should be able to, but it's not, it's still counting down. It's like remaining time 4, 3, 2. I don't know why it's doing that. Hang on a second.
Keep breakouts. Okay, I said open.
I got it. Okay, let me hop into.
To sneak into a room is what I.
Yeah, so if you click on the word breakout rooms in the bottom, you can just choose, if you hover over to the right where it tells you how many people are in the.
This is join, got it. Okay.
Click join.
All right, wonderful. I'll go to the small groups. I'll see you in 10, Michelle.
Okay, are you gonna join room 3 or 4 and I'll join the other?
4.
And then I'll join 3.
All right.
Okay.
90s. Anyway, and it just like his idea was just like, we don't need any punishment. They don't need to be punished. These are people that, no one chooses to be evil, or like they're just, there's trauma and mental illness and all of these kinds of ideas. And I don't know, punishment isn't what is required. And it sort of brought that up to mind, that education, rehabilitation, those things are needed, but not punishment.
Mm-hmm. Well, it's an interesting question, because I actually do believe in karma.
And would be lived out, like how would that then be experienced in rebirth? Because one person, like I might say, well, I think that means that person needs to be reborn into something harder, because that's what justice would look like for me. But somebody else might think justice is something else. So that's where I've been sitting with that.
Yeah, I'm feeling this this tension. I think that Gorakh was talking about of, okay, there's room for all of our individual experiences of truth, but that's not complete unless I also hold or open to or try to struggle with that everyone also has their version, which is equally real and equally meaningful. And so our sense of justice, you and me, Ashley, is different. I'm just going to go ahead and say that.
Right.
But and if I work to try to understand your version of justice and try to keep making my experience more whole, more inclusive, which to me is an experience of like a struggle. It really is like an ongoing thing that I work at, that we will tend towards a more, what's the word, righteous justice. I don't know if there's like a place, like a point we get to, but that we're like getting to it together. And that to me feels like, okay, if we're all in this for forever, all together, going through our processes, that feels good. I feel like there's a lot of goodness in that.
I would say I take a lot of comfort in the idea of karmic justice for people. It helps me feel better about letting people be, even though they're very upsetting to me, but it reminds me that I'm not their judge and jury, and that there is something else that is that grand arbiter. And it reminds me to stay focused on my own karmic debt and my own deeds that would put me in the black or in the red versus the black. And I think there is sort of this cosmic balance sheet of like, are you up to good most days? Are you approaching things with a good intention? Are you coming at it from a clean place? Or are you coming at it from some personal agenda or directive? And
to postpone and say that the people who have a short end of the stick this time, well, it'll all balance out later. We don't have to take personal responsibility for them now.
Yeah, and that's what I was saying with responsibility and integrity. Like, you know, that's a big thing with karma and rebirth for me.
But I guess we can't be responsible for everything.
Thank the Lord. The other thing I think of is, you know, because I believe so much in grace as well. And I believe that grace and karma and rebirth can be, it's yes, it's both, it's all three,
yes,
and it's not one or the other. And so I love, you know, that there can be grace in karma, there can be grace in rebirth. It can all be here and exist together. And I think the Hindus would think that too.
I want to hear something from Steve or Amy before we're out of time.
I was thinking, Jody, what you were saying about responsibility really has impacted me very deeply, because I'm one of those people that is not a fan of reincarnation, because I feel like I've experienced a lot in this life and I'm exhausted already. And so the thought of doing it over and over again, it's like, where does that energy come from? But saying responsibility reminds me of the oneness, and that I've been approaching that concept of reincarnation from a very individualistic and almost selfish standpoint. So thank you, Jody, for bringing that up. That really helped me to see that in a new way.
Personally, the only place that I want to go to is where my mother is. She's in heaven, I want to be in heaven. If she's in hell, I want to be in hell. If she's in a nothingness, I want to be in the same nothingness. So that's my personal take. Karma, I used to think, and I think a lot of people who aren't educated in this area think that you do something bad, you go and you push an old lady down the staircase, then you've got bad karma, and you know, in a day or two or three or next month, you're gonna get run over by a car. And that's what I used to think it was, like it was immediate. And then I started studying in one of my Buddhist classes, the Buddhist sutras, and I find out that this all happens after you're dead. So that kind of, it took away my joy at vengeance, the thought of vengeance, because you said it was silly or immature. No, it's not, you know. I'm sorry, but you know, you push an old lady down the stairs, I want to know that you're going to get something back for it. So, yeah.
But it changes things, right? If it's not about revenge, then what is it about? Is it about the learning? Is it about the evolution? Is it about the balance?
No, it's vengeance. It's wanting to see justice.
I'm voting for
I'm being
vengeance
silly,
too.
but there is some like, I want to see and actually not really this way, but I see then you want the immediacy. I want to see it happen. I don't want to know that he later on in some other life.
I don't need to see it happen because it's so many, a billion times people have said, well, they're going to get theirs. You may not see it, but they're going to get it. So I was happy enough believing that possibly whoever it was going to get whatever they deserved. So I don't really need to see it, but then I don't also really believe that. I don't really believe that in this life they're going to be punished or in any way or get what they deserve. Get what they deserve, not punished. Get what they deserve. I just find it hard to believe. I mean, it would be nice, great, but I don't think so, because I see so many people that do really horrible things, bad things.
Welcome back. I hope you had good discussions. I popped in on a few. They were quite interactive and fun. I wanted to be in all four of them at the same time. Couldn't. Anyone have any observations back from those conversations? Something that stood out for you? You can unmute and speak up. Bueller?
This is Rose. I'll just say that it was an interesting conversation about the desire to see justice in this lifetime, and the idea of reincarnation and perhaps not being aware of justice for the person affected and for the person who has been unjust.
Yeah. Yeah. That was a fun discussion there, Rose. I popped into that. It was very nice. Other observations?
In my group, it stood out I guess, holding intention, how this appears on the individual level and the communal structural level. And I know I pointed out that for me, again, holding intention, everyone defines justice differently. And then in conjunction with, trying to figure out how that would look and feel on the individual and structural, understanding that when you try to think of rebirth, how can that, will it be called justice? And however it may appear. So just holding those things in tension and understanding, like, there's no clarity.
we like the clarity. I agree. It's hard to deal with this always shifting dynamic sort of truth. Yeah, thank you for sharing, Ashley. Any other comments? On justice, I'm reminded of this this thought experiment. Philosophers are the weirdest people, I have to tell you, because they come up with very strange thought experiments. Of course, this one involved Batman, and the point was that the Batman, saves Gotham City, as we all know. Batman therefore saves, I don't know, a few tens of thousands lives. So pick a number, just some random number, say 10,000 lives. So Batman saves 10,000 lives. Agreed? Yes. So his karmic balance is 10,000 lives were saved. All right, let's turn the clock back just 2 more head counts, which is Batman's parents. Somebody kills Batman's parents, which led to Batman being Batman, right? And so if Batman gets 10,000 units of credit, does that person get 10,000 minus 2 units of credit? Because Batman wouldn't be if that guy hadn't killed this guy's parents. And so philosophers tend to have weird discussions. But that's how complicated this topic is. It's not black or white. There's a lot of subtext and nuance. And in fact, in the Mahabharata, which is one of our epics, this comes out in another epic. So you've probably heard of the Bhagavad Gita. Same two people, Krishna and Arjuna, are talking. And Krishna is now educating Arjuna on the right thing. And he tells him a story. The moral of the story is to say that I'll always speak the truth is not actually correct, because you might be putting someone into danger by speaking the truth. You have to know the context in which you're operating. If you're saying the truth brings to, there's, someone's hiding under a bunker and someone who wants to kill them has come up and said, do you know where they are? And you say, yeah, you're right there, right under the bunker, just go look, right? Then you've put those 2 people into danger. And well, that's not a good truth to have, right? So context is more important than forever holding on to one line. And the same with justice. It's very hard to understand how the scales of the universe work. But the faith that is being asked for is to understand that everything, there is order, because the opposite of that is there's always chaos, which makes it really hard to have any sense of how to lead a better life, a just life. You could lead any life, frankly, at that point. Justin, sir, you have a question or comment?
Yes, I'm just still thinking about our group conversation and what Ashley brought up. And my understanding is that from a Sanatana Dharma perspective, we are, you're talking about cycles, and that we are in Kali Yuga, like that we are in a degenerate age. Yes. And so I'm wondering, how do Hindus hold that? Is that relevant to most Hindus in the larger kind of cyclic scheme of things, that we are in an age where there's a lot of distortion and the Dharma is not clear and all, false teachers and all this stuff, and then how does that relate to how a typical Hindu, which I know that's even a weird way to say it, but works with activism and works with are they just like, well, we're just going to wait this out for a few millennia and it's going to be Satyuga again and we'll be good?
Yeah. That is a great and technical question. So for those who are not following, there's a lot of, so the Hindu cosmology has 4 cycles. Cycle of time is split into 4, and they're in 4, 3, 2, 1 sort of order. So we're in the worst sort of time part, which is where the order is mixed. It's very confusing. Everything is, so I call it the age of destruction and distraction, where everything outside is being destroyed and within our minds we're being distracted. And it's a lot of quarrels, a lot of anger and so on. So there's all that going on. And so the question is, well, how is one to behave? It turns out, and should we just wait it out is the question. The answer to that is, I can't wait it out because I don't know how long I'll live. And this age is not going to change, overnight. Unlike the apocalypse that's, sort of predicted in the Abrahamic tradition, we're not apocalyptic people. So we are not waiting for the end of times. We're just going to have to live our lives the way we are right now and deal with, our choices that we're making. So our ask for ourselves, the way I interpret my dharma, is to practice, to continue to sharpen my craft in understanding my dharma, what is the right thing for me to do, and to make the world better. And so it's something called sloka samgraha, improve the state of the world. And as Gandhi said, be the light that you wish to see in the world. So doing that right now, doing the best I can, and spreading this information, this knowledge forward, just pushing it one more generation forward. And hopefully at some point, more leaders will emerge that will help to, again, a restoration of balance. And once again, a more just, a more sensible age will return. We're in the worst cycle. Now, this could be thousands of years or hundreds of thousands of years, depends on whose cosmology you read. The way I read it for myself is my job is to practice my dharma and to let everybody else, let the world just be a little more into balance with whatever activities I can do. And for example, communicating this is my dharma. Jody, you have a question or comment?
Yes. You mentioned Satya and Ahimsa. It's my understanding, but correct me if I'm wrong, that in Patanjali Sutras, at least in chapter 2, where it describes Ashtanga, the 8 limbs of yoga, like Satya is important, but if it creates violence, then Ahimsa is more important than Satya, right? So does that hold true for you as in your Hindu practice, or?
Yeah. Okay, so let me play back so I've understood the questions. The question is, in Patanjali's sutras, he mentioned Satya, which is truth, and then Ahimsa, which is non-violence. And truth is somewhat lower to non-violence in the sense of the priority of things. And question, the Jody, you have for me is that the order in which I see things, and so on, right? To me, the way I look at it, you are not different from me. To me, you and I are the same essential entity. It's just that I am observing from these eyes and you're observing from your eyes, but really the observer behind both of us is the same. And so to that extent, what is the violence? I may inflict violence on you, but I may inflict violence on myself as well, including my future selves, right? And so I have to really pay attention to how do I don't think too much about violence. I think more about how I live my life, which is true to me in the moment that I am, and true to the future moments of this individual entity as well. And that truth matters. Now, does that require me to be violent or non-violent? Well, if it needs me to save my life, and I think that's the higher truth of that moment, I'll try to save my life. But if other than that, will I initiate violence on other people? I'm by nature, it turns out as a child, I was not. My nature is not to be violent. I would get beat up at the playground and come home. And my mom would say, what the heck, just go, beat a couple of people up. But I'd come back crying and complaining. I was always that kid who was, I was always a yogi, it turns out. So I was not violent to begin with. Do I get anger? Yes. I'm prone to social media outrage myself. But then I have meditative practices that allow me to come back. Will I never be violent? That is not true. Those who have seen me drive will know that I can be very aggressive on the freeways. That's just also my nature. So it's a very dynamic thing. All right. Steve is getting bored, so we'll move along. All right. So now we've talked about the tradition. Let me just cover a couple more points. Is that building culture, building tradition, and building this deep well of knowledge takes multiple generations, hundreds of generations. Isaac Newton, in fact, famously said, if he has seen further, it is by standing on the shoulders of giants. And of course, that's the Chartres, I think, Bible with the shoulder of giant he used. The point I'm coming to in this is cultures learn over long generations. And a lot of these truths, the seers and sages had to figure out, they have now seen from on high, but now they need to communicate it to people at large. How do you communicate deep truths to people at large? I'll give you an example. Duck and cover. Some of you might have heard that phrase, of course. Duck and cover is how E equals MC squared was explained to the people. Why? How do I say that? Well, it turns out E equals MC squared leads to the bomb leads to the bomb fear, and the bomb fear leads to trainings at school that when we say duck and cover, go under the table and cover, protect yourself. So you see what's happened? The finding was E equals mc squared, that matter can be turned into energy. But the popular transmission was duck and cover. You can see that deep findings are there, but you're now seeing the duck and cover and wondering, are these people just cowering? No, the answer is no. So it turns out stories, aphorisms, memes, and yes, even laws are used to transmit high truths that are not evident to everyone because, again, shoulders of giants. It takes many generations of building to get to these truths. But those truths must be kept and protected and transmitted. And so the Hindu tradition that if you lose those truths, however, these are all instances of people losing truths. The Brahmin Buddhas are gone. All the Nalanda University is gone. Ephesus, the library at Ephesus was burned. All zealots burn accumulated wisdom all the time. 99% of Greek philosophy, I believe, was burnt down by the pillage and burning of these libraries. So accumulated wisdom can be lost, right? But can also be transmitted. And in the Hindu tradition, the truths have traveled, but they travel in the way of stories, celebrations, our heroes, our gods, I'm going to move myself over here, in all this riot of color. Having a riot of colors, I would posit, is better than having riots. So Hindu tradition that you see in popular culture is a celebration of life, lots of color, lots of stuff. But what I'm saying is, don't be mistaken by the duck and cover and assume that all we know is duck and cover. Don't be confused by all this color and think that this is a colorful, myriad, very underdeveloped religion. Far from it. This is a deep, high philosophy. The philosophy that Hindus have is deeper, better than Greek philosophy. We're just not articulate enough to explain it to Western people. But it's right there, and it's hidden behind all the dancing and all the Bollywood that you can get. All right. Moving right along. Okay, therefore, if you're spiritual but not religious, Hindus welcome you with open arms because Hindus have a deep spiritual culture. Our practices, our philosophy, our sense of pluralism is very robust. And that allows people to be spiritual and not believe in any divinity, names of divinity, shapes, forms, colors of divinity. Everything is welcome. And recognizing that your connection from your heart might call out to one conception of divinity. What matters is the calling out from the heart. It does not matter to which end this arrow points. And so the modern, if you see the reduction in religious fervor in this country and many Western countries, people are turning to spirituality, but are abjuring or giving up on formal religion. That actually brings you closer to Hinduism because that's what we are. I'm going to come to that now and come to that. All right. I'll come to some slide ahead. So the Western society, okay, there's a change of phase, we're now moving from Hinduism and introduction to Hinduism. I'm now going to talk about spiritual care, but I'm continuing the conversation previously. The Western society has been built on the idea of a congregation, a tabernacle, and a whole a system of communing at a single place. And that one-stop shop tends to be the same place. And this is apropos of this audience as well, because you're going to be chaplains or spiritual companions. The societies the West comes from has a single stop for ministering, for prayers to divinity, for sermons, and for confidential confessionals. You go to one-stop shop on a Friday, Saturday, or Sunday, and you deal with all of this. The Hindu tradition, and Justin and Anya, you've been to India, you already know this. Hindus, as you will agree with me, Hindus do not congregate, we crowd. We don't necessarily come to one place in a systematic, orderly method and wait for someone to sermonize. The Hindu society has a very different structure. Just to recap from the previous slide, if I need to minister to my spirituality or I need spiritual advice, I go to a guru. If I need to pray to God, I could go to a temple. I don't need to go to a temple. It's not a requirement. If I need to have someone describe the scripture to me, I go to a scriptural expert and they give me an understanding. And if I need to have a confidential conversation, my uncle, my aunt, my neighbor, everyone's already in my business. I could talk to an astrologer about it. I service Hindu society services these four distinct needs in very different ways from the one-stop shop framework of the church or community-based society. Hindus come from this framework. That is a terrible problem for Hindus in the West. So as you're looking at Hindus, you're going to notice this difference as if you're meeting a Hindu family or person, their framework tends to be like this, which is they're used to not having to, Hindus don't need someone to pray for us because we can talk to God directly. God lives in our heart as ourselves, so we don't need an intermediary for that. We do need someone to tell us what the scripture says. We do want to have confidential conversations, but we're used to talking to different people for that. And so Hindus tend to, this is a problem for us in the West because our society is chaotic, like Justin, you will agree. And this is a very different construct from this very ordered society. We in the West have this problem as well, but the Abrahamic traditions are coming at it from the other side, which is the de-churching is leading to people going out of churches, but now they have these needs that need to be fulfilled. You in this audience, you are now going to be fulfilling these needs, but outside, in many cases, outside of the construct of the Sunday conversation or the Saturday conversations or the Friday conversations. You're now not talking to the congregation, you're meeting people very close to this setup that the Hindus have. So there is a mixing and mingling of social structures that is going on, where Hindus are in the West are dealing with this, and Hindus, everyone in the diaspora, even in urban cities, have this problem where we don't know who to go to for help. And that same thing is true here. Okay, one second, I think I went the wrong way. And so when we talk about spiritual care from a Hindu framework, you need to understand that the Hindu society has been built on a different framework, and it's probably to your advantage because spiritual care, for those of you practicing that, you will find that the Hindu framework is actually quite useful. I'm going to pause here, see if there are any questions or comments because there are chat comments I want to see. Status of women and can women be a guru is a great question. Okay, great. And no queuing. Yes, Justin, I agree. Yes. Okay, Rose, I will address your question about women. I promise. All right, well, let me finish this thought. Now I'm describing to you spiritual care in the Hindu community. I have now a little bit of theory to give you. 1 second. Okay. All right, let's go back to the surface of Mars. All right. Now, the planet Mars in the Sanskrit is known as Mangal. Mangal means also wellness, it turns out. So being well is to be on Mars, it turns out. But anyway, here's the thing. If you send a rover to Mars, as we have, we notice that the surface of Mars is harsh and unlivable. What does that mean? There is low atmospheric cover, so therefore the temperatures are -20 Celsius all the way to -80 all in one day. Same day, it's low and lower, very high temperature swings and always cold. It's harsh and unlivable to live on the surface of Mars because there's no atmospheric cover. Why am I telling you this? I'm telling you this because the Hindu conception of society, this is my crackpot theory, so you may please excuse its inaccuracies, but our conception of society is that the function of a well-run society is to insulate, regulate the emotional states of its members. A comfortable range of existence, just like this orange bar that you're seeing. That's what society's function is, to regulate our emotional states in a happy. It shouldn't be that if I'm happy beyond belief, then I go crazy with happiness because there's no one to share it with. It shouldn't also be that if I've had a negative event in my life and I'm sad or distressed, that I now am contemplating the ultimate decisions because I'm sad and distressed. It should not be, someone should be there to support and buffer my emotional states, share with me in the pain, share with me in the happiness. That's what a good running society does. So think of society as air conditioning, regulation for the spiritual self. If you buy that argument, then the question of your and my role in society becomes a little more apparent. Our role, and this goes back to just your question about, what are we to do in this society and in this age. My job, I feel, is to bring back this regulation in emotional states. That's dharma. That is my definition of dharma. Why? Because that is literally the definition of dharma. Dharma is that which sustains the society, the glue that binds us together. Dharma is that which ensures the well-being and progress of humanity. And I ask you this question, are we in a state of dharma right now? And you would agree, we're not in a state of dharma right now, right? We are outraged, we are lonely, we're angry, and we're all by ourselves. And that's not a great situation to be in. Sorry, that was my phone. And so our job, I see my job as the restoration of dharma. That it happens to be my calling, and which is why I'm running the Hindu Community Institute, where we're teaching this course. So here's what I believe, that the society is truly failing. We are failing. There is a massive and persistent loneliness epidemic. You remember what I talked to you about the surface of Mars? The atmospheric cover of society has been blown off, and now we're alone in a harsh environment. All our happiness, all our sadness is affecting us that much more deeply because we're lonely. This loneliness has an impact on our health. Lifestyle diseases are all around. So I need to give you no further proof that our society is not a well-glued, well-regulated society, not a dharmic society. We have become slaves to technology. We have been slaves to the algorithms that outrage and anger us. And we have become individualized through centuries of this sort of post-enlightenment thinking that we are all alone in islands. A good, well-regulated society is not this way. And so how do we bring it back? Here's how we look at spiritual care from a Hindu point of view. Imagine, you're still able to read this. I'm sorry, my camera is over here, so I'm going to look away. You're still able to read this, right? Okay, good. I just want to be sure about that. Okay, good. All right, let's go back to the screen. So imagine living your individual life in this loneliness band over here, which is essentially at the bottom, just you're born alone, you die alone, you live your life alone. That's the state of life in modern life. Let me just change my situation here. I'm going to move myself here so you can read some of this stuff. Reduce the camera size. Sorry, doing a little bit of this while you watch, which is not ideal. Okay, let's see. This should hold me up. All right. Okay, good. Moving right along. Okay, so now this is how an individual life. Now, imagine in the ideal modern life, you have support of friends and family. How do you have support of friends and family? Your friends and family are there through your events in life, through bereavement, through guilt, thinking about estate and inheritance, career aspirations, your parenting issues and disputes. Your family, your extended network of friends, and your support system is available. In an ideal modern life, that would be the case. Now, juxtapose on that, and I want to talk to you about a few peculiarities of the Hindu tradition that are useful here. On this chart, you're going to see a few words that have been added and a golden line in the middle. Let me describe the golden line. The passage of life is also noted here from before birth, when fetus is in the belly. From that point on, we start celebrating the arrival of a new entity. And so there is a lot of pre-birth rituals in the Hindu tradition. There are rituals and traditions all the way through, including death and after death, long after death, many, many years and decades after death. There are rituals to bring peace to the departed soul. So, and through this, and the year is marked with festivals and things to do. We are Hindu tradition, the Hindu calendar is deeply aligned to the sun and moon and the stars, deeply aligned to what's happening season-wise and weather-wise. We don't get avocados year-round because we know what fruits are ripe when. So through the year, there are lots of celebrations, all of which mark the passage of time. So that's your 45-degree line. On the bottom where it says stages of life is another passage of time, and that's personal time. Hindus recognize 4 types of stages. 1, 2, 3, 4, you're going to see those Sanskrit words written, brahmacharya, grihastha, vanaprastha, and sannyasa. I'll describe what they are. All this is, it's recognizing the right stage of life. And brahmacharya, the first stage, up to the age of 25, you're acquiring knowledge. So you're now conserving your energy and learning how to live, how to earn money, but also what is the true meaning of life. The next stage is grihastha, family life. This is the stage where you earn money, you raise a family, and you donate money, right? And then kids are out, vanaprastha. Vanaprastha literally means pointing to the forests, right? Or departing to the forest. You haven't yet departed. You can see it's a long stage, but then you're beginning to withdraw from the world. Withdraw. You're not trying to artificially continue your sexual appetite or anything. You're just simply saying, I'm going to recognize at this stage of my life, the most satisfying thing to do is to withdraw and now think about the higher purpose of life and think about improving society through other means than simply earning money. And the last stage is sannyasa. You have completely withdrawn and severed your connections with your family. You are now simply hermit-like or renunciate. You may or may not do that in this life, but that is the 4th stage of life. Recognizing the passage of time allows you to recognize that some things seem out of season because they are out of season. You know, the bananas are ripe, are raw and green because they're out of season. This isn't the right time. They're from cold storage. The same with individual life and with time. Understanding the right time for things is important. Now we'll bring everything together. Now, when you look at passage of life, it's not just negative things. It's, you know, there's positive things, negative things. There's a whole bunch of stuff going on through this life, right? And now when you look at life, a Hindu person looks at life, you can say, all right, at this stage of life, what is the right thing for you to do? And it may be different from a preceding or succeeding stage of life. You just have to be more aware of personal time, personal stage of life. There's a fascinating article in The Atlantic about which says your work peak might be earlier than you think. And that references the same thing. Anyway, now let's bring it together. What is our role as chaplains and spiritual guides, spiritual companions? Our role as chaplains and Hindu and as chaplains and companions is this: to act as an extended member of the family, to restore the scaffolding of society that has been weathered away by modern society. Restoring this vertical axis for support and sharing, where we can once again help people regulate their emotional states. And that's how we look at spiritual care at the Hindu Community Institute, which is we look at spiritual care as providing the same support you saw in the Venn diagram that your community might provide, and therefore allowing people to lead better lives. And so this is how we teach the course. Anyway, all right, okay, good. This is how we teach the course. And any questions or comments before I switch cameras? All right. I do have more to share on this course if you're interested, but and how we teach it. But I want to make sure you understand the Hindu framework of spiritual care. Any questions or comments on this? No questions or comments? Okay, I have a few more slides I can show you, but then I will come to Q&A, but I want to show you the temple as well.
Gaurav, there's actually a question from Rose about the role or status of women.
Oh yes, Rose, yeah, Rose's question. Okay, what is the role or status of women in Hinduism? Can a woman be a guru? There are quite, it's not, there is no sort of rule against it, but there are women gurus, even in India right now. There's Ma and Amritanandmai. Women gurus have existed and continue to exist in the Hindu tradition. They're just not as many, but it's not for reasons of there's any sanction against it. So Hindu saints, sages are well known in the Hindu tradition, and women saints and sages are well known in the tradition. What is the role or status of women in Hinduism? It has continued to change with time. The society way back maybe 5,000 years ago was one where women were seen as something you needed to protect. And so men's job was to protect the women. That continues, but now, of course, in modern society, in Hindus in general, are coming out of this girl versus boy kind of thing, where daughters sons were preferred over daughters. Not so much the case now, at least in people that I know. Most educated people love their daughters. And if you look at education levels, it turns out I'm concerned for our sons at this point, because girls are doing really well in education, boys are not. So if you look at who's topping courses in India right now, you see girls all over the place, because girls are really good at education, it turns out, and boys are not. And so there's a restoring of balance in that sense. In spiritual terms, of course, there is a very strong tradition of mother goddess worship. And so the Shakti is power. So the energy of the universe is the mother goddess, and that the veneration of mother goddess and the divinity of divine energy is very popular in the Hindu tradition. There are, let's see, so there's a form of Ma Kali. There's the goddess of wealth, Mahalakshmi. There's a goddess of wisdom, which is Ma Saraswati, and these are all very venerated. And all through the year, there are events, sort of to celebrate the worship of these goddesses. And twice a year, 4 times a year, but more popularly 2 times, there's Navaratri, the 9 nights of the goddess, where all over India there are different celebrations celebrating the mother goddess as well. So there's a lot of dependence on that. Is modern Hindu society in the West pro or anti-women? We don't have a problem with women leaders. Indira Gandhi was, the Prime Minister of India for the longest time. Many Hindus are very strongly supportive of Tulsi Gabbard. We don't have, or even Kamala Harrison. We don't have a sort of problem with women leaders. We're not threatened by women leaders. Let's just say that. Are there enough women leaders? I'm sure we can have more women leaders coming out of India. In India itself, for example, the very famous, very popular external affairs minister was a woman. There's a very famous photo of her standing with the external affairs ministers of other countries, tall men all around. She's in the center wearing a sari, short woman, but her stature amongst her peers was amazing. The finance minister in India is a woman. She's doing a terrific job. I think the defense, some other ministers are. So in general, what I'm saying is the society is balancing out. And in general, the scripture do not have a higher or lower status for women in that sense. Women goddesses are, mother goddesses are venerated very deeply across the Hindu tradition. Any other questions or comments?
Can I ask another question?
Who is this? I'm trying to see.
Sorry, Rose again.
No, I have to find you, Rose. I lost. Oh, there you are. Yes, sorry.
For personal knowledge. So my mom died about 4 years ago. And when I returned to India for her funeral, and we grew up Catholic, there were a lot of rituals that were done that are not done in the US, but family would tell us, oh, you're supposed to do this. And I thought, well, this isn't Christian. Where is this coming from?
Give me an example so I can tell you if that comes from the Hindu tradition.
So, for example, not cooking in the kitchen.
Oh, 100% Hindus. 100%.
And then kissing the forehead.
Yeah.
No. And then, what was it? Oh, a year after the funeral, everyone
100% Hindu.
Okay. So there were a lot of things we were doing that I just thought, I think this is Hindu, and it's just considered what everybody does there, but it's not really a Christian tradition. Okay, thank you.
Yeah. Well, so not cooking in the family, because the spirit that has departed for a few days, if you read the Tibetan Book of the Dead, or you read the Gorakh, what happens after death is for a few days, the sort of the Atma, the self is lingering around the former body, trying to find ways to come back in. And it feels as because their senses, they can still sense, read and smell, they can smell and see and everything, not through these physical senses. They're still trying to associate with this body. And so the family is instructed not to cook. For the next 13 days, a neighbor will cook for them and send them cooked food, because if there's food being cooked, they're going to smell it. They're going to be hungry. They're going to be even more distraught that they're hungry, they're not being given food, family's all crying. I'm lying down here like a dead body, or someone's already cremated my body, what's going on? So to do that, the rules are that you don't cook. That family does not cook. Somebody else cooks for them and gives them food. 100%. That's a Hindu practice.
Thank you.
Justin.
Just in connection to that, when there's a funeral, when all this is happening, are there any, I don't know if rules is the right word, but to not show a lot of emotion, because that may also keep the reincarnating process, like keep the person here?
Yeah. At death, not to show a lot of emotions. So there is both. So depending on the day, you're supposed to not cry around the body itself, because again, it'll cause them much distress and so on. And so that's just for that reason, which is, again, if they're confused or distressed, then they're going to make poor choices for their next life. Why waste a life, right? And there's an interesting story that is told in the tradition where there is a sage, there's a king who became a sage. He became a renunciate, lived in the Himalayas. And when he was a renunciate, there was a deer, a female deer, that was jumping over the river to escape being eaten by a gator or somebody, so some sort of prey. And then while she was jumping, she had a baby. That baby fell into the river. So this sage rescues the baby and grows the baby deer from fawn to deer. Becomes very fond of this deer. Right, just loves this deer intensely. And then when it's time for this sage to die, he's thinking, this deer has gone out to graze. I wonder who's going to take care of him by the time and he dies, as his mid-thought. Now his last thought is that of the deer. And so naturally, the last thought is your next birth. So next birth, he has to be born as a deer. So he lives the whole life as a deer, then he comes back again as a human being. And in the next life, he says, I'm not getting into any of this nonsense. I'm going to stay quiet. So he stays quiet all his life. He's called Jad Bharat. And then of course, he speaks and so on. But it's a story. But the point is that the moment of death is considered a very important thing. I saw from the Wise Fund, there is, look, I'm afraid of getting into social justice issues, because depending on who's doing the research and so on, you can find anything in any society. I'm sure you will find that the status of women in India, it will say is not equal. And I'm sure that is true as well. I'm not denying it. But all I'm saying is that from my experience, the society is balancing out. And there is a lot of awareness that of the status of women needs to be brought to balance. And in general, there's no religious sanction against women and so on. So that's not part of the religion. It may be part of the culture, but those are not the same things. And Hinduism in general is very pro-social justice. I want to be very clear about that. Recognizing that social norms change period on period, and not applying today's rules to yesterday's society. Because we recognize that rules change from time to time. The important thing is to know what the rules of today's society are, and not to subject or to condemn our ancestors for not following today's rules. They didn't know what today's rules are. They followed the rules that brought their society into balance. That's just how we look at society. So Hinduism in general is very pro-social justice, and in general, the injunctions, at least in the scriptures that have come down, is to look at everyone with an equal eye, and to provide for all living creatures, not merely humans. but anything that is born. Praja, the word praja for populace, refers to all born entities and not merely just humans. So it's very ecological justice, very pro social justice in that sense. And I'm not cherry picking one verse from here and giving you this thing. I'm giving you from the broad thrust. There is a deep understanding of how ecology and systems work. Across all scripture, you're going to see that. And so husbandry, as in taking care of land, is a very important part of the responsibilities for the king, for example, or the democratic sort of janpada, the society at that time. So again, I'm giving you things that were probably true a few thousand years ago, may not be true for the last 1,000 years, may not be true today, but generally that is the thrust of the Hindu society. And again, because we don't have a strict set of rules, it's difficult for me to point out one thing or another in that sense. All right, any questions or comments? Should we take a quick break and then come back maybe in 10 minutes? Michelle, are you okay with that? Okay, we're good with that. So let's take a 10-minute break, be back at 11:05 Pacific, and then we will go visit a temple.
Okay, sounds good.
All right, thank you.
Gorakh?
Yes, Justin, I'm right here.
Yeah, I was just wondering if the presentation you're giving, if that will be available in any form for us.
I can send it to you. I'll give you my email and then you can send it to me. You can send me an email, I'll send it to you.
Okay, all right, great, thanks. Yeah, because I didn't want to take too many notes because it's a good presentation, just being present.
Sure, yeah, happy to.
Thank you.
Hello, we're about to reassemble. I'm wondering how this week has been for you. I'm sure there's a lot to take in from all these presentations. So on. How easy is it to remember all the things that were covered? Not at all, right? There's a lot going on. There is a lot. I'm with Chaplaincy Institute. I'm happy to be available to answer any questions you have for later. And again, I've already given you my email address. I'd be happy to answer questions now and later. This is an important topic, all the religious things, but my own experience is because there's so many things to consider, and today is the last day, I guess, in the entire week. So there's a lot of content that you've ingested that you now need to digest over the next few weeks, and really arrive at your own answers on how they apply to spiritual care. So I'm happy to answer questions in the future as well, relating to Hinduism or our take on spiritual care. I'm presenting a panel at the Parliament of World Religions, and that the panel is on spiritual care for the future. So we will have hopefully Anil Mulares from SDI Spiritual Directors, and then the head of the program at GTU, Dr. Kamal Abu Shamsi, he would join, and then Asha ji is joining. Asha Shipman is head of North America Hindu Chaplains Association. So we'll have an interesting panel at the Parliament of World Religions on the subject of spiritual care for the future, not just for the Hindus, but in general. And I'd be happy to see you there as well on that panel. Yes, book on Hinduism that's not Western influence. Hard to give English books that are not Western influence. A lot of the popular writers tended to be people who spoke to the West. So Eknath Easwaran is a great author. His books are fantastic, but just remember that Eknath Easwaran was an English teacher from India who lived in Berkeley. And he's speaking essentially to a Western audience. Happens to be a practicing Hindu, but not a yogi of the type that I might be, for example, which is sort of practice and initiation and so on. Not that his teaching is it's a fantastic book, by the way. Autobiography of a Yogi is a fantastic book. It's written by an editor from LA Times, which you need to know that it's really well written because a Western guy wrote it. The text underlying, of course, is from Paramahansa Yogananda. It's a great book, good introduction to one aspect of Hinduism, which is mystic yoga, which is different from the rest of the tradition. Hinduism for Dummies is a great book. It's written by Ashaji's dad, Amritarji, and Hinduism for Dummies is actually a great book. I recommend that highly because he's describing it to a Western audience, but authentically from a Hindu perspective. Even though I know it sounds, Wendy is Hindu as an alternative. So Wendy Doniger's Hindu is actually a really interesting book. I read it before the outrage, and I then did not read it after the outrage. It's a book that she's a good scholar, and her scholarship is impeccable, but she tends to have a particularly Western perspective, because again, what does a tourist want to see? The highlights, the eating the brains out of the skull in Indiana Jones kind of thing. So she's going to show you the lurid sex details. She's going to show you the whole bunch of, the Western gaze, which is interesting to her audience. But if you want to ask me, I find it insulting and interesting at the same time, because there's so much in the tradition that, and a misreading of the tradition does not do justice to what we are. I wouldn't recommend a non-practitioner's book for that reason, because you always have a, the difference between an autopsy and a biopsy is that in one case, the patient is alive, right? But most Western audiences tend to do an autopsy, assume that the patient is dead, they're describing something in a museum, and you don't describe the lived part of that person. You describe, how tall I was or how bald I am, but that's not who I am as a person. Those happen to be my physical attributes, but I am much more than my tallness or baldness, right? And so a non-practitioner tends to describe the tradition in a very different way. And also Western writers in general, Western people are very driven by form. Form is very important. And in the Hindu tradition, so I'll describe it in my language, which is there's expression and there's experience. Expression is, in the beginning, there was the word, right? Expression is words and the way they're expressed and so on, logic, right? Logos and so on. Experience is not logic. Experience is highly subjective and innate. And the dharmic traditions in general are more about the experience than the expression. The expression is almost always, Guru Nanak, the founder of Sikhism, saying that, when I speak the truth, I immediately regret it. And the reason he regrets speaking the truth is that he has essentially spoken a lie, because you can't speak the truth. The truth is too wide to be expressed in words. Can be experienced, but cannot be expressed. And that is the challenge that Western writers and readers have, because the word is very important. The minute parsing of the text, the literal text, is a very important dynamic in the Abrahamic construct, where how many angels can you fit on the head of a pin is a genuine topic of discussion, because you're going to parse and slice the words very carefully. Even though they're mistranslated 15 times over, someone's still going to do a fine reading. That's not how Hindus work. That's not how Hindu tradition works at all. Everything I describe to you, I have to be experiencing it for it to be a true description. I may describe somebody else's words, but if they're not my experience, then this transmission is of poor quality. In fact, this transmission has failed already. So the truths have to be experienced. And all the sages and seers of the Hindu tradition have given us are ways of experiencing the truth. But we must do the act ourselves. We must experience the truth ourselves. Third-hand truth is no truth in that sense. It's useful to know that sugar is sweet, but it's more useful to actually go find the sugar cane and bite into it and recognize that, yeah, this is what sugar feels like. It's sweet, right? And that experience transmission is very difficult in the West because of the emphasis on form. Western audiences tend to be very, and I practice Qigong, I practice Bon, which is a Tibetan thing. And in all those classes as well, the teachers make this point repeatedly, that you guys focus too much on form, not on the experience within. Because in between subjective and objective, we have taken in the post-enlightenment thinking of pure objectivity and walked away from subjectivity. Our tradition is highly subjective, and we're trying to transmit a subjective experience. Sorry, I gave a very, very long answer. And Justin, you're right about the form and legitimacy. People derive their legitimacy from form and the way they artfully nuance the literal translations and sermonize on that. Hindu tradition doesn't work on artful sermonizing, because if I say something about something that you're not able to experience, then what's the point of that transmission, right? And so the word guru literally means the one that shows the light. And I'll tell you a little joke. It's a script. It's a joke from the text. There are 10 monks who are being tasked to go from one village to another village, and they form together and they start walking, all brothers, and they have to cross this river which is in spate. So there's some sort of a flood in the river. So they hold each other's hands and cross the river. They cross successfully, but now they're concerned that something might have happened. So then one of them steps out and says, all right, let me take count. So you guys stay still, I'm going to count. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. Oh my God, I think one of us just died. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. One of us just died. And so then one guy steps out and says, you go back in, I'm going to count. He counts 1 through 9. One guy's missing. Now they start really realizing that one of them is dead. They start complaining, wailing. They're all, because the guru had said, no one, make sure no one's left behind. They're really distraught. And then this random guy walks by and he says, what's happening? Why are you crying? We lost a brother. We lost him to the river. He says, why do you say that? Well, there were 10 of us, and now there's 9 of us. All right. He says, let me count. He counts everyone. He says, you're 10. You forgot to count yourself. And that's the job of the guru. The myriad, multifarious world that you see outside is great, but you forgot to count yourself. Go within and you will inquire and find the answer to your search for divinity. If God is dead, as Nietzsche said, because we are not looking for him in the right place, we're looking for him in dead things. We look within and we find God. And that's the way Hindu tradition, all these stories are ways the Hindu tradition is transmitted. I think of them as fruits with seeds. The fleshy story, the interesting, funny story is just a way for you to remember the truth. Now that I've transmitted it to you, you will remember the story and it'll pass forward. And you will always be able to unpack the truth out of it. That has been the role of the guru, to tell these stories, to point the truths, sometimes to transmit their own experiences through direct perception. Any other questions, comments? Was this helpful? Look, Hinduism is a very complex topic, and I recognize that some of what I say is so different, and I've probably said many confusing and conflicting things. So I apologize for confusing you, but I'm hoping to give you a sense of the breadth and richness of the tradition. Another thing that has flummoxed even me, and it's taken me decades to parse through this, is that I don't need to go to a temple. There are different types of gurus. There are believer and non-believer gurus. It's very difficult to understand the tradition, even as a practitioner. You could go to an ashram, and they could be a yoga ashram. They could go to another ashram. They're not a yoga ashram, but a devotional ashram. They're genuine. You could go to the ISKCON, which is Hare Krishna's. It's a different system of yoga from the postural yoga that the West knows of. But it's a genuine, in fact, it's probably the most genuine system of yoga that is being practiced in the West. The point I'm coming to is the very different systems, all within the broad fold of Hinduism. There is no one Hinduism in that sense. And like I said, spiritual but not religious, vegetarian, latte, turmeric latte drinking, namaste saying, om chanting, cremation going. If you're doing all that, for all I'm concerned, you're already Hindu, because there isn't a gate which you need to pass or a hazing that you need to go through to become a part of my, my tradition. If you understand my tradition, you're in it. And so there's quite a few Western gurus that have come into the system. I was at Kauai a couple of months ago, and there's a beautiful Hindu monastery, the Savite monastery, beautiful, in the island of Kauai. It's run entirely by Western people. The guru there is a Western person and very authentic. Celeste?
Yeah, I'm just curious. I'm wondering, I feel like every religious tradition has a spectrum of how much of a part of your life it is. They have fundamentalists, Orthodox, there's Orthodox Jews, there's fundamentalist Christians, so I'm wondering what maybe the fundamentalist spectrum of Hinduism looks like.
Yeah. What are Hindu fundos? And the question is, can you be fundamentalist? The thing is, the whole point of Hinduism is that there are many ways to the truth. The question is, any reductionist truth, any reduction in the volume of truth that you're allowed to engage in is fundamentalism. And so there are Hindu fundamentalists that would want you to reduce the volume of truth that you're entitled to, but those are not, in my reading, those are not Hindus. What would that look like? The problem is, if I describe it to you, it's still from an Abrahamic construct. Being highly secular is core, because spectrum of belief is innate in the Hindu tradition. You don't like one God, you go to the other God, not a problem, right? So what are the fundamentalist Hindus? There are some people that are anti-Western, so who might, for example, not like Valentine's Day, or not like people saying RIP when someone dies. And of course, it's the same sort of woke type phenomenon where they're out correcting each other. They're correcting people saying, no, you can't say RIP, you got to say Om Shanti. I do that, but I do that as a way of educating, not as a way of correcting people. I just say, look, you don't rest in peace in the Hindu tradition. That's actually really bad. You say Om Shanti, go in peace. Okay, but the other people who say no Western stuff, or no Valentine's Day, or no pizzas for you, there are some people like that, but they're so loony, fringy that I'm not sure if that's something that I'd waste too much time on.
This is Rose. Would you say that as an Indian Christian, that perhaps Hindu fundamentalists would look at a non-Hindu Indian as not being an authentic, quote unquote, Indian?
That is a great question. So it depends on who you ask. There are some people who would say if you don't subscribe or follow the Hindu tradition, or you follow Christ, you're not Hindu. But the broad thrust of Hindu sort of society is that if you buy into all the things I told you, and if you buy into this set of philosophical systems, then you're Hindu. Your God may be someone on a cross. Mine might be, one with a flute. They are both shepherds. Mine just has cows. Yours has sheep. Your God is your God. And so in that sense, Hindu altars, I'll give you my own personal experience. Hindu altars at home tend to have every expression of divinity. My father has his own puja room. And if you put a picture of Christ there was no one raising eyebrows saying, no, this is not good. Now some people say that this is not good because it's not seen, it's seen as giving in to the European colonization project. But in general, that's not been the tradition in India. In India, when the Zoroastrian people were asked to go from Persia, they found a home in India. They didn't have to convert to Hinduism. They were allowed, in fact, required to keep their faith. Syrian and Malabar Christians, as you know, right? So Syrian Christians are Christians from an older strain of Christianity, right? So they're St. Thomas Christians, for example. So there have been Christianity in India for 2,000 years. There's been Islam in India for 1,400, 1,300 years. No one's asked to change their tradition. What happens is typically you absorb that, and you absorb a little bit of the Hinduness in your tradition. So a lot of Indian Sufism. I'll give you another example. One of the revered saints, two of the revered saints in the Hindu tradition were born Muslim. Right? One is Kabir. Kabir is super famous. Kabir is a poet. He's very revered in the Hindu tradition, but he was born into a Muslim family. Sai Baba, you'll see his photos in India all over. His temples are all over. I've been to his temple. His temple is literally a mosque. He lived in a mosque. He was born Muslim, but he's a revered Hindu saint. And there's no one raises eyebrows on that. My point is the construct of Hinduism in general is a very absorbing, it's an and kind of thing. You have your divinity, bring it on, you bring your sense. Our problem is with this reduction in truth business, that if physics class answers are not valid in biology class, then I have to determine if I'm a zealot. And zealotry is new to the Hindu tradition. It's very, it's an acquired taste in that sense. Yeah. All right. Okay. Cultural. Okay. So 2 questions. Is an analog in Hinduism for baptism that makes you a Hindu? Great question. There are some people that do have baptism. Some tradition, Sikhism does actually. You have to. They can baptize you. It's not the same word, but there's holy water to be drunk. So there is a way. In Hindu tradition, there has now been a way to become Hindu. So Arya Samaj, which is a reform, so in the 1900s, 1800s, the contact with Christianity led to a sense of shame or acquired shame in the multifarious gods and the shapes and images of the Hindu tradition. And there was a reform movement in the Hindu tradition that said that let's go back to the monotheistic basis of Hinduism. Again, it's a response to Christianity. And in that tradition that still continues, called the Arya Samaj, not to be confused with Hitler. That is an appropriation, by the way. But Arya Samaj is a very reform part of Hinduism. They do have a way of bringing people into the tradition, which is a formal process. And they are proselytizing in that sense, if you could use that word. But other than that, Hinduism does not necessarily have a way to come in or to leave, because what is the coming and leaving? You found a new way to truth. Good for you, my friend. That's your way to the truth. It's all right. And that tends to be the case. Now, appropriation is a good question. India in general has been a very well-off society. India and China were the America of the few thousand years prior, right? So the rich sort of culture where everyone came to for business and pleasure. And in that sense, India has always absorbed people from outside. It's a very absorptive culture, and therefore appropriation. If you look at the creation of statues in the temple, statues are not an Indian innovation. They're actually Greek or Roman. I can't remember who made statues first. But when Buddhism went out, statues of Buddhas were made, forms of Buddha were made, and those were re-imported back. So there was appropriation, but we appropriated it back, and now we have statues. And in fact, the Hindi word for statue is Buddha, which is Buddha, because that's what a statue was, the shape and form and a face, the smiling face with the turbaned head, that's Buddha. And that's how this form was imported back into the country. So there's continuous dialogue. Is yoga in the West appropriation? I have to tell you that when I go to Barnes and Noble, there are still a few, there's one in my city, and I go to the Eastern philosophy section, 98% of the books are yoga books written by Western people. And that to me is, shame on the Indians, frankly. Why aren't we writing better books? Why aren't we writing things that people want to read? And so is it appropriation? Well, we should be writing ourselves. And if we're not doing it, shame on us. If you want to write, go for it. It is appropriation when you take our words and symbols and make nonsense out of it. For example, a certain mustachioed gentleman from Germany decided that he would use our symbol and our phraseology to make his own, madcap cult. That's his problem. But now I can't put a swastika in my temple. Or when I get my car blessed, the priest has to not make a swastika, because that's how you would typically bless the cars. You'd make a swastika on it. But now someone might say I'm a skinhead Nazi and then call the cops on me, right? That is appropriation, because you've essentially taken something that was beautiful and sacred and you made some nonsense culty thing out of it. And yeah, I get mad at that in that sense. But yoga, practicing of yoga in general is seen as a, look, we've imported back at India, it turns out. The physical postural stuff, there's only a few postures mentioned in the Hindu text. So all this postural yoga, I teach that, is really, we're also learning from you. But the meditative part, the dhyana and pranayam, I teach that, and that you're better off learning from a Hindu person who's a practicing Hindu than a Western person, because eventually they'll make something like mindfulness out of it, which I think is not a good thing. John Kabat-Zinn's mindfulness is devoid of a sense of divinity, which actually is a rootless sense of meditation. The Hindu meditation has a very devotional aspect to it because it helps us. Even those that don't believe in God, by the way, have a devotional aspect to it because it aids in your meditation, your stability. You can't be relaxed if you can't let go, and you can't let go without understanding that there is a ground to which you must let go. Surrender is an important part of meditation practices, but you have to have a sense of divinity. So to create mindfulness out of that by removing all sense of God, because your Western audience requires it, is appropriation. And frankly, that that does press buy buttons, because in India also people say meditation and mindfulness, neither of which words are from the Hindu tradition. The Hindu word for meditation is Marcus Aurelius. He's thinking about a topic, and that's meditation. The Hindu word for this is the word you already know, which is Zen. Zen is Japanese. It came from Japan. It was Chan in Japan. It was Chan in China. It became Zen in Japan. But before it got to China, it was Dhyan in India. So those of you who do yoga already know what Dhyan is. Dhyan is this meditative practice. And so I teach Dhyan. I don't say I teach meditation for that reason. Hopefully I've confused you a little bit more. Questions, comments, or do you want me to show you what the heathens are doing in their temples? Happy to show you. All right. So there's obviously this taboo. The golden calf worship did not work out very well for the Abrahamic people. And so this shape and form and worship of shape and form is seen as a taboo in the West. And so therefore, we're informed that it's retrograde. It's somehow less intelligent to believe in a deity with shape and form. But I ask you this, if you've done basic algebra, the first axiomatic belief in algebra is that there be an x such that 4x plus 3 is equal to y. Solve for y, right? Something like that. You've done algebra, you remember this. And at the end of this, x and y both disappear, right? You're looking for answers, x is equal to 3, y is equal to whatever, 15, right? The point of algebra is, Janet, that was okay, yeah. Okay, sorry. Okay, so when you look at algebra, you recognize that x is a vehicle for getting the answer. X is not the answer. You don't hold on to x and say, no, I found the answer, it's x. You say, that's just what I'll call it until I have the answer. It helps to have a shape and form for that reason. Because it turns out, and in the Gita, this is talked about extensively, you could say, I love the universe. You could say, I think the universe is just. You could say, I'll believe the universe will take care of me. You could say that, but can you hug the universe? Can you feel love for the universe? Can you feel a filial connection or a parental connection or a friendly connection to the universe? You really can't. It's infinite. You can't hug the universe. You can't touch the universe. You can't weep for the universe. You can't seek out the universe. It has no center. It helps to have a form because we think in forms. We give hurricanes names because it helps us think about it. The way our storytelling brain thinks, it thinks in human form. Even the sentence structure that the universe is kind thinks of the universe in a noun form, which is as a human person. It's anthropomorphizing. Therefore, to say that divinity is everywhere is true, but divinity can also be expected to be in a form. And we, therefore, the way Hindus think, I'm giving you this technical answer, when we have a temple, we consecrate the murtis, and we invite the divine to come inhabit those so we may pray to them. And then we ask them to go away at the end of that prayer. That's a standard process in the Hindu tradition. Because the universe is infinite, you can't deal with the infinite. It's too much. So you invite them to come sit in your heart or in this form, in this geometrical figure or whatever. You invite them to come inhabit. You deal with the object with the degree of veneration that you have, and then you tell them to go back into the universe, run the universe after that. That's the core part of Hinduism. So when you go to a temple and you see the shapes and forms, it isn't that we truly believe that there are these shapes and forms that the divinity are. They may well be, but it helps us engage with them. It helps us relate with them. It helps us remember stories about them and tell our children about them. And in that sense, they help us propagate and remember things that we can't remember otherwise. And so when you go to a temple going is not a requirement in the Hindu tradition. And again, I was telling Michelle this, when I go speak at interfaith, I go speak at churches and mosques all the time. And usually the question from my Christian colleagues is, what temple do you go to? And for the first few years of doing this interfaith thing, I didn't know what that question meant. I said, yeah, I go to this one, this temple. I realized only later that people go to a temple as in they belong to that community. It's the Mormon church that explained the whole thing to me, and I was confused about it previously. And I realized I'd misanswered everybody else. What temple do I go to? I go to every temple I can find. I do not belong to a temple. I go to every temple because I can feel the presence of divinity. I have a quiet, clean, nice smelling place where I can remember my connection to divinity. I'm not required to do that. I can remember my connection to divinity right here as we speak. But it helps to have an environment where I can remember more readily. And I don't belong to a temple, I can go to every temple. And in that sense, it's not the same answer as I thought it was previously, which is my mistake. So Hindus can go to every temple. And why would they go to a temple? Well, either because it's a festival, and through the year, there's a lot of different celebrations to different deities and their stories and so on, or you go because it's you're going on. January 1 for some reason is huge at the Hindu temples for reasons that are unexplainable from Hindu scripture. There's nothing in the temple that says Jan 1 of the Georgian calendar is a holy day. It's not. But we've just begun to go to the Hindu temple, and now they have 20,000 people coming in that day. It's crazy. It's just, this is how you go. And what's happening at the temple is interesting. And I'll show you that when I show you the video, is there is a form of the divine. There are going to be geometrical shapes. There's going to be a lot of a lot of images that's going on. And the priest, interestingly, unlike in an Abrahamic construct, the priest's job is not to deal with you or intercede between you and divinity. This is the divinity. Their temple is their home. They've been invited to come live in that home. And the priest's job is to take care of them, which is in the morning, wake them up, give them a bath, dress them up nicely, and then pray to them and make sure their temple is clean. Afternoon, put them for an afternoon nap, pick them up in the evening, do this again. So it's almost as if they're human and they're living there, and the priest's job is to take care of them. You happen to be there while this is happening, right? So they're not here to answer your questions about divinity, which is a question that people who need spiritual care. The challenge with Hinduism is you can't go to a temple and say, look, there's been a death in the family, give me wisdom. That's not the priest's job. They're not equipped to do that sort of stuff, which is why what you do and what people from our institute do is important, because people do need help in those moments. But the Hindu society is completely ill-equipped to handle that sort of thing. I'll show you one thing as an example. I'll send you the link as well, so that you're not left on your own. Let me say, just give me 1 second. I'm switching over. I will send you a link, I promise. I'm just going to show you something, and then I'll show you the temple. And you feel free to keep adding more questions in the meantime. Let's see, speaking at a memorial. Okay, let's go here. Okay, no, wait up. Okay, so I'm going to send you this link, and I'll actually show you this video. This is what happens at, so somebody asked about hospice and death, right? So this is going to be a relevant video for you to watch. 1 second. I've sent you the link here, and I'm now going to show it to you, so you don't need to click, I'll show it to you so you don't have to. Okay, we're here, you're not watching my WhatsApp, you're here. Okay, this is me, obviously. Namaskar, I'm Gorakh. I'm board member and dean at the Hindu Community Institute. This recording is a part of our teaching material, available to the Counselor of Hindu Tradition course. The subject of this talk is speaking at a memorial, presenting death as a hopeful and transformational event. So what are we grieving for? So anyway, I'll stop the video now because you can watch it yourself. The point is, so we've made these guides because it turns out I go speak at memorials. We get called to speak at memorials. It's a job you don't go to a Hindu priest for because they're ill-equipped for this sort of thing. But I've made this video. I've sent you the link. You can watch it. You can also go speak at a Hindu memorial with the content which is designed for exactly what you're doing. Spiritual care and chaplaincy. All right, Rachel, you had a question. What would be a good translation of the Bhagavad Gita? That is a great question, to one which I have not very good answers. Okay, Are there other worlds that you can be reborn is another question. Steve, I'll answer your question. And Rachel, I promise to answer your question as well. Are there other worlds? There are infinite universes. This universe itself, it's coming out. The conception is that out of the pores of the skin of Mahavishnu, as he breathes in and out, bubbles come out. These bubbles are each individual universes. Infinite universes come out and then are absorbed back in with every breath, right? Each universe is born and dies. And so that's our conception. Multiverses is not science fiction in our tradition. It's the nature of reality. Can you be born in other worlds? I'm pretty sure you can. The scriptural evidence on this, they talk about other worlds, other lokas and other worlds all the time. Can you be born in them? You can be born in other lokas, yes. And again, it's a series of progression and so on. Are there other universes? It's hard for me to say because you have to really read those into the text, which I don't want to do because then I'm projecting. It's hard for me to say. Bhagavad Gita translations, Rachel, is a impossible like question because Bhagavad Gita translations depend on the translator. I myself working on it. There are a whole bunch of other people that are working on it. Bhagavad Gita, because it's like a capstone text. It combines a whole bunch of Hindu philosophy into a very dramatic context. For those who don't know, the context is a war between 4.5 million people, all but 10 of which are about to die. And this is right at the beginning of that. And the ace archer, the MVP of the whole program, is having second thoughts about this because he says, the other side is my family and my teachers. This war doesn't look like it's worth it. And then he gives up. And then this 18-verse conversation, 18-chapter conversation happens. Bhagavad Gita is written in Sanskrit, and it's not something that you translate literally, which is true for every religious text, but more true here because every word has nuance and context, and each translator comes in with a lot of color and balance. I like Georg Feuerstein's translation, but he's a technical translator. I like Swami Bhumananda. I'll show you 1 second. But I teach Gita classes at the Hindu Community Institute. We do about 9 sessions, and we're not done. 9 4-hour sessions are not enough. And my first session is literally this. I bring out, I think, a dozen or so Gitas like this. This version is the one I like. It's in Hindi, unfortunately. There's an English version of this, but look at how thick this is. This one is the most authentic, but this is quite, you're going to have to be really, really wanting to read this to get into it because it's super detailed and from a practitioner. But I show you this one. I like this, Swami Bhumananda Tirtha. I'll send you a link here. I'll send you a link. This is good because it's essentially 1 page per verse and describes it reasonably well. This Swami Bhumananda Tirtha is fantastic, and it's an interesting backstory. I was in my MBA school. This is India's #1 MBA program. I like to brag, but anyway, I was already a yogi type guy, so I was into all yoga. I went to my hometown, Delhi, and I go to the bookstore because that's what I do with my girlfriend at the time. We go to the bookstore and buy books, and I buy a book on a whim on meditation. And that's the book I take to learn meditation. And that was my gateway drug into Indian spirituality. Prior to that, I was reading Western philosophy. This was my gateway in. Exactly 25 years later, I get called to speak at a conference. I meet the Swamiji whose group is organizing this, and I really like him. And I realized to the day, this is 25 years to the exact day, it was his book that I read that put me on the journey, that got me here to speak at the conference on the Gita. So, coincidences for you. So his book is fantastic. I recommend that. I'll send you. There are quite a few good translations, but always buyer beware with the Gita translations. The writer's biases show through. If they're theistic, they'll have one point of view. If they're atheistic, they'll have another interpretation of the same text. It'll be legitimate, but it won't be complete. Just be aware of that. Eknath Ishwaran's Gita is, you can totally read that. It's a good take on that, on the Bhagavad Gita. Okay. Temple. Let's show you the temple. I'll just show you for a few minutes, I promise, and then I'll leave 5 minutes for Q&A. Okay. I'm showing you the temple I do go to. This is no, we're not playing this. Okay, we're here. This is the Shiva Vishnu temple in Livermore, and if you were coming to this class physically, this is the temple that I would meet you at. And of course, there's weddings and stuff. I'm going to show you some old videos. Let's see. Okay. Okay, Hanuman, because he's my favorite divine being. Let's watch again. You seeing my screen, right? Okay, let me parse what's going on. This, I told you, is the Archika, the priest, right? Again, their job is to pray to this form of divine. Hanuman in English is called the monkey god. That is not quite true, but he features as a heroic character in the older of the two epics in India, which is the Ramayana. And he has yogic powers. He is essentially epitomizing the maximum yogi you can be, and he's devotional. So he's very loved as a deity in India. And the belief in Hinduism is that in Hinduism is that he's Chiranjeevi. He's one of the 9 immortals. So he's still alive. So we can pray to him, he'll come to help. And that's the thing. Now you're going to see a lot of fruits. Abundance is a core feature of this. You're seeing a lot of fruits being laid out as part of the devotional practices. Just skipping forward. This is Hanuman. This is a small statue of him. Look at the beautiful fruits around him. Let me see if I can get to the priest. So there you go. So he's singing praises in Sanskrit. Even I don't understand which prayers he's doing, but you see he's sitting down on the floor. You see no shoes here. Shirts and shoes are not required at the Hindu temple, as you can tell. Evidently, definitely shoes are not welcome. These are holy places, and you don't walk in with shoes into a holy place. Even to this date, if I go to a temple, to a church or a mosque, my instinct is to take the shoes off because it's ingrained into me. I can't wear shoes to a holy place, even if it's not from my religion. So it's the same over here. It's disgusting to other people, but that's what you do. In our tradition, we wash our feet just like Jesus did, and we walk in with clean feet, and shirts are not required in this. Okay, I'll keep on. I'm skipping forward just to.
Priest and our chief priest Sambasridharan Garu by his guide.
Yeah.
That concludes the Hanuman Jayanti, and since morning 8 o'clock this event was temple and in all of the sanctums themselves. So this is work that.
So I'm going to pause and just you see behind him, you see this door over here. This is another. So these are all different houses of different forms of divinity. Right over here, this is Vishnuji. So Vishnuji or Balaji is called. Behind this gentleman over here is Mother Lakshmi, the goddess of opulence and wealth. To his right, or to the right of this is the Mother Earth over here. So there are there's the goddess Lakshmi and Mother Earth, and this is Sri Vishnu himself. And
several fundraising opportunities.
Of course, fundraising. We don't tithe, so we rely on funds that are donated. I'm going to keep skipping. And I can't show you this. I can only show you the sights, but not the sound and the smells. It's sweet smelling. It's very beautiful, flowery smell, because as you can see, I'm showing you some more. Everything is just decorated with beautiful flowers, and it has a sense of holiness in there. One of the, let's see, okay, here's a homam, fire sacrifice, they call it. Let's see if I can open it. No. Let's see, watch more. No. No watch. No, watch again. Is there a watch again? Did I miss it? No, there is no watch again. Okay, it's too bad. I could have shown you a fire sacrifice. Fire sacrifice is big in the Hindu tradition as well. Okay, let's see this. Okay, no videos here. I'm trying to show you some video with the fire sacrifice, but I can. Let's see if with the wedding we're able to see it. Let's show you a wedding. Oh no, this is in the future. Let's take a wedding in the past. Sorry, I'm dithering. Okay, let's see this video. So this is the layout. So you're going to see flowers and leaves, water. These are all acceptable forms of offerings that you bring to God. Fruits, flowers, leaves, and water. That's the traditional offerings. You don't need too much to offer to God. God cares for your sense more than your, your amount of. It's not about money. So you see a lot of flowers being prepared, lots of fruits, leaves, and these are all sacred depending on scripture, and of course ladies getting together wearing saris. Okay, now here is the actual wedding process. This is a South Indian thing, and South Indian process is different from the North Indian process. You're going to see a lot of geometrical shapes and art also, and the bride is going to be brought in. Blessings. Okay, I'm going to stop sharing. We've got over time. But the big fat Indian wedding is a thing. Indian weddings tend to be big fat and very family oriented, very colorful, very joyous events. And many days, depending on if you watch Bollywood movies, they could go on forever. Lots of stuff. So anyway, I've shown you a little bit inside the Hindu temple. And this is what these polytheists are doing. There are different rooms for divinity. Each form represents a different aspect of divinity. Just the way I said, the DMV versus the police versus, the bus conductor. They're all different forms and different functions of divinity. Shiva represents all that is sacred. Shiva literally means bringing sacredness. Shamkara means peace, bringing peace. And so Shiva represents a meditative state of creation. Vishnu literally means that which pervades everything. And so Vishnu is everything. Everything is made of Vishnu. So his job is the creator. He's also the source of all creation, according to the Vaishnava tradition, and so on. So these are all different rooms and different backstories to every god and deity, every deity, and they have different days of worships and different significance of each of them. And your favorite deity might be one or the other, or all of them, and everything is acceptable. And with that, I think I come to the end of my very fast exposition of Hinduism and spiritual care in the Hindu tradition. We briefly looked at the temple. I want to know if you have any questions or comments before we go into the closing prayers. I would appreciate your feedback. I know you'll fill a survey form later, but live, while you have me, I'd love to hear from you, your questions and comments. Everyone's welcome to
I enjoyed your sense of humor.
Thank you. I try to keep it light. There's too much going on in the world for it to be dogmatic. Any other questions or comments? Good. All right. I'm going to take you to the closing prayers. I'll describe the closing prayers before we get into it. I'm going to switch cameras. This is Justin to you. This is all the new tech wizardry that technology can do. So now we're in a different camera, but now you're hopefully looking at my screen. This is another closing prayer from the Upanishads. And this is a prayer, again, you will see it has no, I forgot to talk you through the opening prayer. I'll do that. This does not appeal to any individual divinity. You can chant it and still be a good Christian. There's no problem with it because it's essentially a prayer for world peace. It says, may all be happy, not me and my family, but all, because we recognize that we are all connected. I can't just be happy if you're not happy. May all be free from illness. May all we see be auspicious, and may there be no suffering, and peace 3 times. I should have shown you the opening prayer. Let me show you that, and then I promise to come back here. Let me see, opening prayer. Okay, I think this is the opening prayer. Okay, here we are. The opening prayer was, like I said, a legal disclaimer of some sort, where it says, may we both be protected, both you and I, may we both be nourished. This is as a prelude to a teaching conversation, right? Now, why protected? Because we want to be safe in order to truly learn, be free from fear. Be nourished because if we're running out of energy, then the learning will be that much poorer. May we work with great energy, and may our knowledge be radiant. Just the way you rub 2 sticks and fire comes out, let our interactions be so furious that they radiate out the light of knowledge into the world outside. And interestingly, may there be no differences or disputes between us. That sounds like something a lawyer might put in, but what it means is, let there be differences and disputes during the process of this Q&A, but then let them resolve by the end, and we all end up with understanding and not disputes and differences. And then peace 3 times is common to opening and closing, inside, around, and between. That's how you, okay. And then we're back to the scary guy. We'll go back to the closing prayer, and then I will chant it for you. And then with that, we will come to the end of today's session. So please join me in sitting comfortably. Sit with your back straight, back, neck and head in a straight line. Now close your eyes gently and relax the expression on your face. Relax your shoulders. Relax your belly. Now bring your attention into the belly, and as you inhale, let the belly expand. As you exhale, let everything go. Just relax into your state. Keep the attention in the belly, breathing into the belly and breathing out and letting go. I'm going to chant Om 3 times and then the closing prayer, Sarve Bhavantu Sukhina. If you'd like to join me, bring your palms together at the heart center. Press your palms together gentler. Touch your fingers together gently and gently touch the back of the thumbs into your chest. Keep your attention now in the hollow between the palms, right next to the heart center. Exhale completely, take a deep breath. Inhale. 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 Inhale and chant. Sarve Om Sarve Bhavantu Sukhina Sarve Santu Niramayaha Sarve Bhadrani Pashyantu Ma Kaschid Dukkha Bhag Bhavet. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Take your arms behind you, grab your right wrist with your left hand and breathing in, stretch. Breathing out, bend forward in a deep sense of surrender. Come back up, breathing in, release your hands, rub your palms together to generate some heat, and then gently cup your eyeballs with the hollow of your palms. And first massage your face and your neck, and then blinking, open your eyes, and then pull your palms back like an open book. Namaskar. I appreciate your patient listening and your very insightful questions, and I appreciate the time we've had together. I'm happy to answer or address any questions about Hinduism in the future. You have my email address. And if you want to know more about the course, you can go to hinduci.org. And if you want to audit the course, we welcome you to audit the course. It's all good. We appreciate your time either way. All right. Michelle, I turn this back to you. Thank you very much. Namaskar.
Namaste. Thank you.
Thank you. Have a great day. Good weekend.
Thank you.
Bye now.
Thank you.